Chapter 679. In the cultivation world of the 9 prefectures, there were many types of formation flags. There were a total of 108 types, which corresponded to the number of heavenly spirits and earthly fiends. Every formation required different formation flags, and the combination of different formation flags could often bring unexpected changes to the formation. Therefore, brilliant formation cultivators had their own unique understanding and experience in the use of formation flags. The same formation might have different power when set up by different formation cultivators. This was not only dependent on the formation cultivator's level of attainment, but also the choice of formation flags. There were many ways to do this. He had obtained 32 formation flags from the 100 Formation Pagoda, and 32 more this time. Altogether, he had a total of 64 flags. Although it was not enough to complete a set, 64 formation flags were enough to deal with most situations. Moreover, Lu Yi usually did not use these special formation flags. He would either refine them himself or buy them from the Tianji treasury. It would not be a pity even if they were damaged or lost. After inspecting the 32 formation flags, Lu Yi carefully put them away. Then, he began to construct small spirit-gathering funnels. He cultivated while comprehending the enormous amount of formation information in his mind. He had passed the 33rd level of the 100 Formation Pagoda. There was no more level. When the time limit for staying on this level was up, he would be sent out of the pagoda. Vaguely, Lu Yi felt that he had forgotten something. Normally, this would not have happened to him. However, his spirit was now full, and he did not have the energy to think about other things. He had even forgotten to release Hupa earlier. It did not seem to be a particularly important matter. Lu Yi decided not to think too much about it. 6 hours passed in the blink of an eye. When the surrounding spirit qi suddenly dissipated, Lu Yi felt an enormous and irresistible repulsive force. He had to leave. He silently sensed his body's condition. Apart from the enormous pressure on his spirit, everything else was fine. It could be said that he had gained a lot from the 100 Formation Pagoda this time. It was several times more than what he had gained in the Sky Expanse sect. At the very least, he had not felt his spirit being full in the Sky Expanse sect. This meant that the gift he had gained in the 100 Formation Pagoda this time could not be compared to the previous time. And this was under the premise that the power of his spirit was several times stronger than before. Even though such gains had already allowed his attainments in the Tao of formations to increase greatly, it still hadn't arrived at its limits. Once he digested and stabilized all the things in his mind one day, he wondered how much his attainments in the Tao of formations would improve. In addition, Yang Kai's cultivation had risen from the 5th order to the 6th order. Although it was only a small advancement, his strength had undoubtedly increased significantly. As the repulsive force surged, the space around Lu Yi began to distort. Instinctively, he put the amber back into his spirit beast pouch. Then, he activated his spirit energy to protect himself. He raised his hand and placed it on the hilt of the Panshan saber at his waist. He didn't know what he was guarding against, but he felt that it was the right thing to do. In the next moment, his vision blurred and he appeared at the entrance of the 100 Formation Pagoda. The scene that entered his field of vision stunned Lu Yi, because as far as the eye could see, there was a sea of people. Were there so many people outside the 100 Formation Pagoda? He vaguely remembered that there were quite a few people here when he first arrived, but it wasn't to this extent. The moment he appeared, countless pairs of eyes focused on him. All of them revealed astonished expressions. Because the 100 Formation Pagoda had been resonating these days, none of the array cultivators chose to challenge the pagoda. Those who had challenged the pagoda before had already come out. Therefore, when they saw Lu Yi appear, the nearby array cultivators couldn't help but be stunned. No one knew when Lu Yi had entered or how he had come out of the 100 Formation Pagoda at this time. Among the countless pairs of astonished eyes, Lu Yi felt a few sharp gazes. Looking up, he saw a few familiar faces. Lu Yi came to a realization. He finally understood what he had forgotten and what he was guarding against. Previously, when he was rushing to the safe passage of the 100 Formation Pagoda, he had been attacked by 2 Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators. In the end, he killed one of them and the other was severely injured. He had opened the safe passage with a slash of his saber. He didn't know whether the other was dead or alive. Such injuries were very serious, but for cultivators, they shouldn't be fatal in a short period of time. Since the other party had recognized him and suffered such a huge loss, as long as he didn't die immediately, he would definitely send a message to the outside world and call for friends. In that case, his whereabouts would be exposed. In other places he could hide and escape, but in the 100 Formation Pagoda, there was only one exit. As long as he came out of the 100 Formation Pagoda, he would definitely be blocked. The pressure on his soul made him forget about this for a moment, but his instincts were still there. Therefore, even if he forgot before he was expelled from the 100 Formation Pagoda, he still put the amber into his spirit beast bag and assumed a defensive posture. As many thoughts flashed through his mind, a sharp saber light had already spread out in his field of vision. Xiaoliang and Tan Shang had been guarding the exit of the 100 Formation Pagoda, so they noticed Lu Yi as soon as he appeared. Without any hesitation, Xiaoliang drew his saber and slashed. The distance of several meters was covered in a flash. This slash was accompanied by an abnormal surge of spirit energy, fully displaying the might of a ninth-order cultivator. At the same time, Tan Shang also brandished his spear. The great spear seemed to come alive, like a dragon emerging from the sea, and stabbed towards Lu Yi with an unparalleled might. A pincer attack from two Cloud River Realm 9th Order cultivators. At such a close distance, ordinary people wouldn't be able to react at all. Success! Xiaoliang and Tan Shang roared in their hearts at the same time. Their days of waiting here had not been in vain. They had actually managed to trap Lu Yi here. Just as they were thinking this, Lu Yi also drew his saber at the same time. As he drew his saber, his figure flickered to the side. Not only that, a solid defensive spirit rune appeared on the surface of his body. With a cracking sound, the newly formed defensive rune was struck by the long spear. With the point of contact as the center, cracks spread out in all directions, and the rune shattered with a bang. The power of Tan Shang's spear was evident. However, in the instant the defensive rune was blocked, Lu Ye's body moved slightly to the side, and the long spear almost brushed past his armpit and pierced through his clothes. Lu Yi felt a burning pain on the skin beside his ribs. It was conceivable that if the defensive rune hadn't blocked at the critical moment, this spear would have pierced through his chest. If that happened, even if he didn't die, he would be crippled. Although he had brushed past death, Lu Ye's eyes were unprecedentedly clear. At this moment the huge pressure on his soul seemed to have been relieved. The long saber in his hand blocked Xiaoliang's slash. The sharp saber light shattered with a bang, and sparks flew everywhere. Xiaoliang's body shook slightly, and his brow furrowed. The feeling of this saber strike made him realize that something was wrong. This Lu Yi was much stronger than he had imagined. The last time he fought with Lu Yi was in Fox Immortal Valley. At that time, Lu Yi had asked him to teach him his saber technique. At that time, Xiaoliang felt that Lu Yi was stronger than an ordinary 4th Order Cloud River Realm cultivator, but it wasn't that exaggerated. But now the strength that Lu Yi had shown was simply astonishing. This was because the other party had actually blocked his long-prepared saber strike head-on, and it was under the circumstances that he and Tan Shang had joined forces. What did this mean? This obviously meant that Lu Yi was qualified to fight him head-on. In a life-or-death battle, Xiaoliang didn't have time to think too much. His saber strike, which he had been so determined to kill, failed, so he took advantage of the situation to change his move. His long saber swept past Lu Ye's mountain saber and went for his neck. At such a close distance, this saber strike could be described as extremely dangerous. The mountain saber suddenly rose up, killing Xiaoliang's intentions in advance. But in the next moment, Lu Yi flew sideways as if he had been struck by lightning. Tan Shang's spear had failed to kill Lu Yi. When it pierced through Lu Ye's armpit, it shook a little. With this shake, the long spear struck Lu Ye's ribs like a whip. Lu Yi felt the blood and qi in his abdomen tumble, and the pain in his ribs was unbearable. He could even hear the faint sound of bones breaking. Fortunately, he borrowed the force of this blow to soar into the air and rush to the side. Behind him was the 100 Formation Pagoda, so there was no way out. In front of him was Tan Shang and Xiaoliang, so if he wanted to survive, he could only break through to the side. Tan Shang's spear strike had injured him, but it had also given him an opportunity to take advantage of it. "Where do you think you're going?" Xiaoliang was furious. The sound of his saber rang out as he caught up with Lu Yi at an extremely fast speed and stabbed his saber straight at Lu Ye's back. He was from the wild saber sect and had cultivated for a long time. In terms of saber skills, he was much stronger than Lu Yi. The only thing he lacked compared to Lu Yi was experience in life and death battles. This wasn't to say that he lacked experience in this area. At his level of cultivation, there was no cultivator who hadn't experienced a few life and death crises. It was just that Lu Yi had a place like the Mirage Realm to train. Ever since he obtained the Breath Fruit Core, he had died countless times in the Mirage Realm. Xiaoyang didn't have this kind of convenience. Therefore, in the face of a life and death crisis, Lu Yi had experience that ordinary people couldn't compare to. At this moment, the Heart's Eye secret technique played a crucial role. The aura of death followed behind him like a shadow. If it were any other cultivator, they would have turned around to block. However, Lu Yi didn't even look at it. The moment Xiaoyang's saber was about to reach him, he activated a defensive spirit rune. This defensive rune still couldn't block Xiaoyang's saber, and shattered the moment the tip of the saber pierced over. The tip of the saber pierced 3 inches into Lu Ye's flesh, almost piercing his internal organs, but it was enough to exhaust the power of Xiaoyang's saber. A monstrous heat wave swept out. Somewhere in the crowd, 2 lifelike fire dragons shook their heads and swung their tails as they rushed towards Lu Yi. It was Chu Yun and Zhou Pei. The 2 of them were Dharma cultivators, so their reaction speed was slightly slower than Xiaoyang and Tanshang's. It wasn't until Lu Yi fought with them that they used their techniques. But it was just the right time. At this moment, Lu Yi was injured by Xiaoyang, and the defensive barrier behind him shattered. The 2 fire dragons slammed into Lu Ye's back one after the other. Lu Yi was enveloped in a sea of flames. The huge impact caused him to spit out a mouthful of blood, which evaporated in the scorching heat. Immediately after, under the gaze of countless people, Lu Ye's figure, wrapped in flames, broke through a layer of ripples and disappeared without a trace. The situation was the same as when he sent the 6th Order cultivator flying with his saber in the safety passage. Chapter 680. Other than the safe passage from 100 Array City and the 1,000-meter radius around the 100 Array Pagoda, there were all kinds of spirit arrays within 30 miles of the 100 Array Pagoda. These spirit arrays were left behind by array cultivators who came to the 100 Array Pagoda to cultivate since ancient times. Due to the unique resonance of the 100 Array Pagoda and the accumulation of time, these spirit arrays were far more powerful than ordinary spirit arrays, even if they were left behind by Cloud River Realm cultivators. There were many danger zones in the Cloud River battlefield, such as those occupied by Overlord-level demon generals, or some natural danger zones. But if all the danger zones were ranked, the area around the 100 Array Pagoda would definitely be in the top 3. One of the people who ambushed Lu Yi in the safe passage was sent into this danger zone by Lu Yi. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. After a few days, Lu Yi followed in his footsteps. Xiaoyang raised his saber and frowned as he watched Lu Ye's figure disappear. He was powerless to stop him unless he was willing to chase after him. But he wasn't an array cultivator, so he didn't dare to rashly enter such a danger zone. Even the array cultivators present didn't have the guts to enter such a place. The sudden change shocked everyone present. Although array cultivators from both camps came to the 100 Array Pagoda to train all year round, no one had ever fought here. After all, they were all here to improve their attainments in array Dao. It would be unreasonable to fight. So the atmosphere here had always been harmonious. Even if the array cultivators belonged to different camps, they could still compare their skills and verify what they had learned. But on this day, the peace was finally broken. Fortunately, the battle ended quickly. An array cultivator who came out of the 100 Array Pagoda was sent into the danger zone by 4 Cloud River Realm 9th Order cultivators. That's Lu Yi, yeah? Someone in the crowd suddenly asked. Affected by the huge amount of information, Lu Yi instinctively put the amber into his spirit beast bag when he came out of the 100 Array Pagoda, completely forgetting to wear his mask. When he appeared, many people saw him. Naturally, there were people who recognized him. The crowd was in an uproar. The incident of 20 million demon-rich cultivators being poisoned to death in the mine had caused an uproar. After all, it was too shocking. Although some time had passed, the storm still hadn't subsided. Even the array cultivators who cultivated here all year round had heard that Myriad Demon Ridge was tracking Lu Ye's whereabouts, but they didn't expect him to appear in the 100 Array Pagoda and be killed as soon as he appeared. Recalling Lu Ye's figure wrapped in flames when he finally fell into the danger zones, no one thought that he had any hope of surviving under such circumstances. After all, the array cultivators were 9 ninth order cultivators. Xiaoliang turned his head to look at Chu Yun and Zhou Pei. Whether Lu Yi was dead or not, the two of them were the ones who knew best. After a moment of silence, Chu Yun and Zhou Pei shook their heads. If Lu Yi died, their contribution points would definitely change. There would also be blue fluorescent battle imprints floating towards them, but none of this happened. Every one of the 4 who attacked Lu Yi had injured him, and he was wrapped in 2 spirit techniques that turned him into a ball of fire. How was he still alive? How tough was Lu Ye's life? Tan Shang's expression was also a little ugly. To be honest, it was really surprising that Lu Yi could survive. Thinking back to Lu Ye's growth since he met him, Tan Shang couldn't help but shudder because he could feel that Lu Ye's cultivation had improved again. Now he had reached the 6th order Cloud River realm. Back in the hunting ground, Lu Yi could only flee in panic like a stray dog when he was being chased by him. But now Lu Yi could still survive under the joint attack of him and Xiaoliang. During this period of time, it could be said that he had watched Lu Yi grow at an astonishing rate. Brother Xia, if you don't kill the snake, there will always be hidden dangers, Tan Sheng said softly. How could Xiaoliang not know this? These days he and Tan Sheng had been trying to take Lu Ye's life, but they rarely had the chance to fight. This time they were the closest to success, but they still failed. Thinking so, he said loudly, "Fellow Taoists of Myriad Demon Ridge, this wild saber sect Xiaoliang has a request. Can you please break the spirit array and find the trace of the person who escaped?" Xiaoliang had also heard of the danger zone outside the 100 Formation Pagoda. He didn't dare to barge in like this. However, most of the people gathered here were array cultivators. If the array cultivators of the Myriad Devil Ridge could join forces and break the array, Lu Ye would have nowhere to hide. If he was alive, he wanted to see him. If he was dead, he wanted to see his corpse. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to rest easy in the future. The Wild Saber sect was a famous first-grade sect, and Xiaoliang had a 9th order cultivation. As soon as he opened his mouth, an array master shouted in the crowd, "Dare I ask fellow Taoists, Xia, is the person who escaped just now Lu Yi of Jade Blood Sect?" Although there were already people who recognized Lu Yi and said his name among those present, only Xiaoliang and the others had actually seen Lu Yi in person. Until there was conclusive evidence, no one could be sure that it was Lu Yi. At this time, Xiaoliang naturally wouldn't hide it. He nodded and said, "Yes, that is Lu Yi of Jade Blood Sect. It really is him." The array master who spoke gritted his teeth. "This bastard has done all kinds of evil, killing our Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators everywhere. His evil deeds are too numerous to be recorded, but he still dares to come to the 100 Array Tower. As an array master, this Zhang is ashamed to be associated with such a person. Fellow Taoists, Xia, count me in to break the spirit array." As soon as one person spoke, more array masters echoed, and for a moment, there was a chorus of voices. However, there were many people from Grand Heaven Alliance present, and all of them frowned. But in this situation, they didn't dare to act rashly, otherwise, it would inevitably lead to a chaotic battle. There were too many cultivators gathered here. Once the battle broke out, not to mention the fact that there was no one in charge here, they wouldn't be able to form an army. Even Xiaoliang and the other 9th order cultivators were a huge deterrent. If the battle really broke out, Grand Heaven Alliance would definitely suffer. So, even if they were unhappy, no Grand Heaven Alliance cultivator stood out to refute. The situation was very good for Xiaoliang and the others. After a while, under the leadership of Xiaoliang, Tan Sheng, and the others, many Myriad Demon Ridge array masters began to break the spirit arrays in the danger zones. This was unprecedented. Although there were many spirit arrays in the danger zones and they were very dangerous, if the Myriad Demon Ridge really worked together, they could raise the danger zones to the ground. At that time it would be fine if Lu Yi died, but if he didn't, he would have nowhere to hide. The formation cultivators who had been harmonious suddenly became very distinct. The Myriad Demon Ridge array masters were working hard to break the spirit arrays. while those from Grand Heaven Alliance gathered together and watched from afar. Xiaoliang and the others ignored them. Finding Lu Ye's whereabouts was more important, and it wasn't time to complicate matters. In the Grand Heaven Alliance camp, the cultivator surnamed Luo looked at the 100 Formation Pagoda with stormy waves in his heart. Everyone's attention was drawn to the conflict just now, but only he, who was prejudiced by his first impression, noticed some abnormalities. Or rather, the others noticed it too, but they didn't think much about it. Lu Yi came out of the 100 Formation Pagoda. Array masters generally didn't spend much time challenging the pagoda. If they failed, they would be teleported out. Even if they succeeded, they could only stay in it for a while. Moreover, the 100 Formation Pagoda had been resonating recently, which was a benefit that array masters dreamed of. So since a few days ago, no array masters entered the 100 Formation Pagoda, and those who were inside came out early. Until today when Lu Yi appeared. In other words, Lu Yi had been in the 100 Formation Pagoda for the past few days. He had also silently calculated that the 100 Formation Pagoda had resonated a total of 34 times recently. Excluding the first time, it would be 33 times, which corresponded to the number of floors in the 100 Formation Pagoda. He had always thought that it was Lu Yi who was challenging the pagoda, but if that was really the case, then it was too exaggerated. In the Sky Yen sect, he had passed 33 floors in one go and triggered 33 resonations. In the Cloud River battlefield, he could also pass 33 floors in one go and trigger 33 resonations? What kind of terrifying array Dao talent was this? What kind of profound array Dao attainments did the current Lu Yi have? From what he knew, the highest record of the 100 Formation Pagoda in the Cloud River battlefield was the 25th floor. In other words, no one had ever passed the 26th floor. And the one who had left this record was an array Dao Grandmaster from 300 years ago. That person's array Dao attainments were unprecedented, and had reached a height that no one in the 9 states had ever reached. Even that great Grandmaster didn't pass all 25 levels in one go when he challenged the 100 Formation Pagoda. Instead, he did it multiple times. Especially after the 20th level, he could only pass one level each time. He had to wait until his attainments in array Dao improved before attempting the next level. At that time, this array master was famous throughout the 9 provinces. With his strength, he could have lived until now. Unfortunately, this guy was a bit of a playboy. In the end, because of jealousy, he was killed by an expert from the same camp. It was really a pity. Passing the 25th floor already gave him such a dazzling achievement. It was hard to imagine what Lu Ye's array Dao attainments would be in the future after passing 33 floors in one go and triggering 33 resonations. If such a person died just like that, it would definitely be a great loss to the Grand Heaven Alliance. But in the current situation, even if he wanted to save him, he was powerless unless he could incite the other array Dao Grandmasters of the Grand Heaven Alliance to fight to the death with the Myriad Demon's Ridge. As this thought flashed through his mind, Cultivator Luo sighed softly. He had clearly seen the scene of Lu Yi falling into the danger zone. Under such a terrifying attack, it would have been difficult for him to survive. He was probably already dead by now, right? What a pity, what a pity! The array Dao Grandmasters of the Myriad Demon's Ridge were breaking the array on a large scale. Xiaoliang and the rest stood at the side and waited. At the same time, they were also vigilant of the array Dao Grandmasters of the Grand Heaven Alliance. He turned his head to look at Chu Yun and Zhou Pei. The two of them shook their heads slowly. The former said, "He's not dead yet." He was extremely puzzled. How could he not be dead? 7017K. Chapter 681. The 4 people who attacked Lu Yi were all 9th Order Cloud River Realm cultivators, and each of them had injured him. Tanshang's spear hit Lu Ye's waist, while Xiaoliang's saber pierced Lu Ye's body, breaking his spirit energy shield. Then 2 powerful spirit techniques wrapped around him and turned him into a ball of fire. In that situation, it was equivalent to Lu Yi taking 2 spirit techniques head-on without any protection. In all fairness, no matter which of the 4 people suffered such treatment, they wouldn't have survived. But why didn't Lu Yi die? Soon, the spirit array where Lu Yi disappeared was broken. Xiaoliang immediately went forward to investigate, but all he saw was blood splattered on the ground, but there was no trace of Lu Yi. This guy really didn't die. This is troublesome. Thinking about it, the best situation right now was for Lu Yi to struggle at death's door. Although he hadn't died yet, he wouldn't live for long. If that was the case, then he would have done his best this time. Even if he couldn't get Lu Yi's body to exchange for the huge bounty, at least this malignant tumor would be eradicated. Without Lu Yi's deterrence, he could boldly seek revenge on Li Baxian. But this was only the most ideal situation after all. He had to consider other possible scenarios. For example, Lu Yi was only seriously injured and was currently hiding somewhere in the danger zones to heal himself. If that was the case, he could find a way to break the spirit array and leave. This guy's attainments in the Tao of Arrays were extremely high, and after coming out of the 100 Formation Pagoda, his array Tao cultivation must have improved again. Thinking of this, Xiao Yang couldn't help but feel a little irritated. Ever since he came into contact with Lu Yi, everything had gone wrong. In order to hunt this guy down, he had already wasted several months of cultivation. While the myriad Demon Ridge array cultivators were breaking the spirit arrays, Lu Yi passed through the spirit arrays with a pale face, secretly feeling lucky. Fortunately, the spirit technique that attacked him at the last moment was a fire attribute spirit technique, allowing him to urge the power of his talent tree to save his life. If it had been any other type of spirit technique, he might not have survived. Xiao Yang and the others were curious as to why he didn't die under such an attack. If they knew how he killed Sacred Flame Sex Huoluan, they wouldn't have so many doubts. With the innate skill tree, Lu Yi's resistance to fire element spells was unmatched by anyone else. However, even though he could block the power of the spell, he couldn't block the impact of the spell itself. Therefore, he was still injured by the impact of the two fire dragons. Moreover, before that, Xiao Yang had stabbed him in the back, 3 inches into his flesh. His current state could be said to be heavily injured. The enormous pressure on his soul had already made him dizzy and his thoughts sluggish. Now that his physical body had also suffered heavy injuries, it could be said that he was in an extremely bad state. Fortunately, he managed to escape into the danger zone covered by countless formations in time. The place he had entered was not chosen at random. Before he entered the 100 Formation Pagoda, he had already anticipated the situation he would encounter when he exited the pagoda. The reason why he insisted on entering the pagoda and risked his life was because he wanted to use this danger zone to escape. Before he entered the 100 Formation Pagoda, he had deliberately observed his surroundings. The place he had entered was not far from the exit of the 100 Formation Pagoda. There was an illusory formation that didn't have any destructive power. Therefore, when he exited the pagoda, although Lu Yi didn't remember many things in time, after he was attacked, he immediately remembered the escape route he had left behind. With the help of Tan Shang's spear, he escaped in that direction. If Xiao Yang and the others had the guts to pursue him, he would really have been doomed. Unfortunately, in the face of such a strange formation, who would dare to pursue him? Only then did he have the hope of escaping. The illusory formation he had entered had been operating for an unknown period of time. Its power was ridiculously great. Any Cloud River tier cultivator who entered would probably be filled with illusions, unable to distinguish north from south. However, Lu Yi's soul was ultimately much stronger than cultivators of the same cultivation level. He was only slightly affected and was fine as usual. He didn't break the formation. Instead, he chose to use his own unique method to sneak out of the range of the formation. This way, the formation could still be used to block any possible pursuers. Observing the construction of his insight spirit inscriptions, Lu Yi constantly observed his surroundings. He saw that there were many hidden spirit arrays in all directions. The number of them was shocking. However, under the effect of his insight spirit inscriptions, these spirit arrays basically had no place to hide. This saved Lu Yi a lot of time. He passed through the gaps between the spirit arrays and continued forward. However, he didn't go far before he reached a dead end. Looking around, he saw that the different spirit arrays were tightly connected, leaving not even a single gap. In this way, unless Lu Yi stayed where he was, he would inevitably enter an unknown spirit array. Helpless, he could only try his best to choose a spirit array that didn't look so dangerous, sneak in, and leave from another direction. Lu Yi continued forward like this for more than 2 hours, but he still couldn't leave the danger zone covered by so many spirit arrays. Furthermore, there was another embarrassing thing that happened, which was that he had lost his way. Logically speaking, this kind of thing shouldn't happen to him. After all, he was still a 6th-order Cloud River Realm cultivator. However, there were many spirit arrays operating here, which seriously interfered with his judgment. Coupled with his poor condition at the moment, his soul and body were under double pressure, so for a moment, something that shouldn't have happened actually happened. Feeling a little dizzy, Lu Yi stopped. Since he couldn't leave this place in one go, he could only quickly heal his injuries. Although he didn't know where he was now, even if there were pursuers behind him, it wouldn't be easy to find him. So for the time being, his situation was safe. First, he had to heal his injuries. After he recovered, he would find a way to leave this place. Making up his mind, Lu Yi took Hupa out of his spirit beast bag and asked Yi to keep watch while he sat down cross-legged. He had already swallowed a healing pill when he was on his way here, so his injuries were improving. The knife wound caused by Xiaoyang wasn't serious, only 3 inches into his flesh. It was just a flesh wound. With his physique and the effect of the healing pill, it wasn't difficult for him to recover. The real damage caused by that knife was that it had broken through his defense. The serious injury was the injury to his internal organs. Tanshang's spear was like a whip, fiercely whipping his waist, causing his internal organs to shift and his ribs to crack. After that, he was hit by the 2 fire dragons, so his internal injuries were even more serious. However, Lu Yi had suffered more serious injuries before, so it wasn't a big problem. As long as he had enough time, he could recover. The most important thing now was to quickly comprehend and digest the huge amount of knowledge about spirit arrays in his mind and relieve the pressure on his soul. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to focus on many things. Letting the healing pill take effect, Lu Yi urged the river of spirit energy to cycle back and forth, healing his injuries. At the same time, he immersed himself in comprehending the huge benefits he had obtained from the 100 Formation Pagoda. Time passed by. While Jiang Yi was meditating and recuperating, outside the 100 Formation Pagoda, the array formation cultivators of the Myriad Devil Ridge were in full swing. Array formations that had existed for many years were being broken one after another. The array formation cultivators of the Grand Heaven Alliance were furious but did not dare to say anything. No matter what the original intention was, these remaining formations outside the 100 Formation Pagoda were treasures left behind by their ancestors. Many formation cultivators would study these formations when they had nothing to do and verify what they had learned. But now, these formations that had existed for who knows how many years were being broken one by one. Looking at the momentum of the Myriad Devil Ridge, it seemed that they were going to break all the formations. If that really happened, the area outside the 100 Formation Pagoda would no longer be known as a dangerous place. Of course, it wouldn't be easy to completely flatten the numerous formations that covered a radius of 30 miles. After a hurried day, Lu Yi opened his eyes and slowly exhaled in a hidden formation 10 miles away from the 100 Formation Pagoda. The gift from the 100 Formation Pagoda wasn't easy to digest, but after a day of unremitting effort, the pressure on his soul had finally lessened. At the very least, it wouldn't affect his thinking like before. There was no need to rush the rest. It wouldn't be too late to slowly digest it in the future. His physical injuries hadn't fully recovered yet, but they were no longer a problem. After a day's delay, it was time to leave. Lu Yi stood up and called out to, "Let's go." Yi responded and rushed into Hu Po's body. In a situation where she might encounter outsiders at any time, she generally wouldn't show herself. Everyone knew that Lu Yi had Hu Po by his side, but very few people knew that he had Yi by his side. At certain critical moments, Yi could play a crucial role. Hu Po jumped onto Lu Ye's shoulder and squatted down. He narrowed his eyes and assumed a lazy posture. It was worth mentioning that Hu Po and Yi's current cultivation was equivalent to the 6th Order Cloud River realm. Lu Yi had broken through to the 6th Order when he passed the 15th floor of the 100 Formation Pagoda, while Yi and Hu Po had broken through a few floors later. Looking at it this way, the gap between her and Lu Ye's cultivation wasn't that big. Lu Ye's cultivation progressed rapidly because he swallowed a large number of spirit pills every day. Even without a spirit stick to use, his cultivation was still growing little by little. This was something that no other cultivator could achieve. And the main reason why the two little ones could keep up with Lu Ye's cultivation speed was because of Hu Pa. During this period of time he had always been lazy, as if he didn't get enough sleep. In fact, he wasn't lazy, but he had been digesting monster cores. Lu Yi ate pills and Hu Pa also ate pills. The difference was that Lu Yi ate source spirit pills, while Hu Pa ate monster cores of monster beasts. The energy contained in monster cores was much greater than source spirit pills, which was why Hu Pa had always been like that. He spent more of his energy on digesting monster cores. In addition, Lu Ye's cultivation was ultimately just his own. But the two little ones were different. Their cultivation was always double the happiness. No matter whose strength increased, it would be beneficial to the other. Lu Yi wouldn't be surprised if their cultivation surpassed his one day. With the support of the Insight Spirit inscriptions, Lu Yi searched for the flaws in the spirit array. Soon he broke out of the spirit array while keeping it intact. To be continued. Chapter 682. In fact, the best way to escape from such a dangerous place was to fly away on a magic tool. However, Lu Yi had tried all sorts of places and found that they were all covered by the flight restriction formation. He couldn't fly at all. Moreover, the flight restriction formation was the most powerful formation he had encountered so far. Even with his current foundation, he could barely fly 7 feet above the ground. This was obviously not something a Cloud River tier formation cultivator could do. Thinking back to the information and rumors he had bought about the 100 Formation Pagoda from the Heavenly Secret Commerce Alliance, Lu Yi understood that this should be an inexplicable mutation. There were many formations in the dangerous place, and the flight restriction formation definitely existed. However, it shouldn't be this powerful, nor should it cover such a large area. However, the 100 Formation Pagoda would often emit strange rhythms. These rhythms not only had the effect of enlightening formation cultivators, but also caused many of the formations in the dangerous place to undergo some unpredictable changes. This was also the reason why the formations in the dangerous place were so extraordinarily powerful. Many common-sense things were no longer useful in such a dangerous place. Lu Yi couldn't help but suspect that this mutation had something to do with him being unable to escape from this dangerous place. He seemed to be moving in one direction, but in reality this might not be the case. This was a little difficult. If this was really the case, unless he chose to completely destroy all the formations he encountered, it would be very difficult to escape from here. Inside a trap formation, Lu Yi stopped and looked at a skeleton in front of him. Along the way he had encountered several skeletons like this. These were obviously formation cultivators who had rashly entered the dangerous place to break the formations because of their superior abilities. In the end it was easy to enter, but they couldn't leave. In the end they were trapped to death here. Judging from the traces left behind on these skeletons, they had all died in different eras. Most of them had died from the power of the array formation. However, the skeletons in front of him had a dent in the skull, and the entire skull was cracked. This was clearly suicide. It was hard to imagine how desperate a Cloud River tier cultivator would be to choose to end his life in such a way. Lu Yi put away the storage pouch beside the skeleton. Just like the storage pouches he had put away before, the restriction locks inside had long since been broken. Without a cultivator's spiritual power pouring in for a long time, the restriction locks would not be able to function for a long time. After a brief inspection, Lu Yi didn't find anything good in the storage bag, but he didn't care. He didn't even have the intention to collect the corpse. He stepped forward and passed through the formation. After this trip to the 100 Formation Pagoda, his array Dao attainments had become much stronger than before. Now he was constantly digesting the 100 Formation Pagoda's gifts as he walked through the danger zone. If it was in the past, he would have to expend quite a bit of effort to pass through the layers of formations after falling into such a dangerous place. But now it was as easy as breathing and drinking water. This kind of dangerous land that could make it difficult for formation cultivators at the Cloud River tier to move an inch was as easy as walking on flat ground for him. With a single step he entered another formation. At a certain moment when Lu Yi passed through another spirit array, he suddenly raised his head and looked ahead, a look of surprise in his eyes. Along the way, all kinds of formations emerged one after another. Basically, they were all connected to each other without the slightest gap. However, The space in front of him didn't show any signs of being enveloped by a formation. This was a little strange. What entered Lu Ye's field of vision was a high platform that was several square meters in size. It was strange that there was such a thing in the danger zone outside the 100 Formation Pagoda. What made Lu Ye even more curious was that there was a vaguely familiar figure on the high platform. The figure was walking back and forth on the platform, but seemed to have encountered some problem and was scratching his ears and cheeks. That figure was the cultivator surnamed Yu, whom he had sent flying with a single blow in the safe passage from 100 Formation City to the 100 Formation Pagoda. At that time, this person was injured by Lu Ye and fell into the danger zone. Lu Ye didn't chase after him because he felt that the other party probably wouldn't survive. He didn't expect to meet him here. Was this guy so lucky? On that strange high platform, the cultivator surnamed Yu was busy scratching his ears and cheeks. Suddenly, he felt something strange and looked up, meeting Lu Ye's mocking gaze. His entire body instantly cracked. "It's you." The cultivator surnamed Yu couldn't believe his eyes. How did this bastard Lu Ye find this place? Previously, he was sent flying by Lu Ye's blow and fell into the danger zone. Fortunately, he didn't trigger the formation and fled in panic. He didn't know how he ended up here. Seeing such a high platform, he naturally had to study it carefully. Unfortunately, Lu Ye appeared before him before he could find any clues. "My opportunity," the cultivator wailed inwardly. Although he didn't want to give up the opportunity on the high platform, he also knew that he was no match for Lu Ye. Lu Ye's previous blow had completely scared him out of his wits. Therefore, after recognizing Lu Ye, this person decisively fled to the back, instantly crashing into a spirit array behind him. However, his luck didn't seem to be very good this time. Following a violent buzzing and flames, a powerful formation seemed to have been activated. After a few miserable screams, everything returned to normal. Lu Ye watched silently. Even if the other party hadn't run away, he would have killed him anyway. However, the cultivator surnamed Yu's decisiveness was still surprising. Well, it saved him the trouble of attacking. Looking up at the high platform, Lu Ye's interest was piqued. He'd never heard of such a high platform hidden in the danger zone outside the 100 Formation Pagoda. Even the information he'd purchased from the Heavenly Secret Commerce Alliance didn't mention it. It wasn't strange when he thought about it. No one dared trespass into such a danger zone. The skeletons Lu Ye encountered along the way were the fate of trespassers. Moreover, in such an environment, trespassers wouldn't be able to distinguish north from south. It wouldn't be easy to find the high platform. What was this high platform for? Lu Ye's curiosity was piqued. He leaped up and landed on the high platform. Although he didn't know how long the high platform had existed here, it was well preserved. Moreover, the platform looked like it was chiseled from a huge piece of withered jade. It was as smooth as a mirror and didn't have any veins around it. However, right above the high platform, there were many complicated patterns that were intertwined. At a glance, it gave off an extremely chaotic feeling. Lu Ye's heart trembled as he focused his attention. The complex veins on the high platform looked like a transportation formation. However, it was slightly different from the transportation formations Lu Ye had learned about. Formations were like spirit veins. The veins weren't unchanging. Every formation and every spirit vein was formed by countless yin and yang elements intertwined. The changes within were endless. However, sometimes a slight change could cause a huge increase or decrease in the effectiveness of a formation. What was certain was that the veins carved on the high platform were definitely a transportation formation. However, Lu Ye wasn't sure what kind of effect this transportation formation had. Moreover, under his observation, he discovered that this transportation formation wasn't complete. The void spirit veins at the core were slightly damaged. If he wanted to know the effects of this transportation formation, he'd have to repair it. No wonder that cultivator surnamed Yu was scratching his head, as if he'd encountered a difficult problem. It wasn't that Lu Ye was underestimating him. No matter how skilled he was in formations, it was impossible for him to repair this transportation formation with his cultivation of the Cloud River tier. Perhaps this was the way out? Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat. He'd shuttled back and forth among the many formations in this fearsome land, yet he still couldn't find a way out. However, there was a transportation formation here. This naturally made him think. Perhaps he could use this transportation formation to leave this place? Even if it wasn't, this formation had piqued Lu Ye's interest. If he could repair this formation, it would be quite beneficial to him. He immediately made a decision. He'd repair this formation and then test its power. Perhaps he'd be able to escape this place in one fell swoop. As soon as he thought of this, Lu Ye immediately got to work. He'd set up a transportation formation before. The 100 Formation Pagodas test also included a transportation formation test. Thus, it wasn't difficult for him to repair this formation. The difficult part was that the veins on the high platform were carved. If he wanted to repair this formation, did he have to use the mountain pan saber to carve the missing veins? He pulled out the saber and tested it. To his shock, he discovered that the high platform's material was abnormally hard. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't leave a mark on it. What kind of material was this? Although Lu Yi had reached the Cloud River tier, he didn't know much about the natural treasures of the 9 provinces. He couldn't recognize what material this high platform was made of. However, such a hard material had to be worth a lot. Yet, it had been chiseled into a massive platform to support a transportation formation. He didn't know who had such a method, nor did he know why it would appear here. After trying for a while, Lu Yi had no choice but to give up. Even the mountain pan saber, which had been enhanced with the double peak sharpness spirit mark, couldn't leave a mark on it. He didn't know what else he could do. Perhaps he could directly use his spiritual power to repair the formation. With this thought, Lu Yi immediately raised his hand and pressed it against the high platform. His spiritual power surged and poured into the veins. The high platform, which had been sealed for countless years, slowly blossomed with light at this moment. As Lu Yi poured his spiritual power into it, the veins lit up until they reached the damaged area. Lu Yi controlled his own spiritual energy and used his own ideas to completely replenish the damaged formation. The moment the entire formation was completed, a sudden change occurred. Lu Yi felt an irresistible suction force coming from his palm. The spiritual power in his body was flowing out at an unimaginable speed, like a flood breaking through a dam. This change shocked Lu Yi greatly. He hurriedly tried to withdraw his hand, but he couldn't do it. In less than 10 breaths' time, his spiritual power had been completely depleted. Owa! Crouching on Lu Ye's shoulder, Hupo also sensed that something was wrong. Its tiger eyes widened. The space around them began to distort. This was a sign that the transportation formation was about to take effect. Hupo turned around and hugged Lu Ye's head. The feeling of being transported was unforgettable. If it had known that it would be transported, it would definitely have asked to hide in the spirit beast pouch. To be continued. Chapter 683. On the Jade platform, Lu Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At this moment, his spiritual energy was almost completely depleted. His injuries, which had already been stabilized, were now affected. Blood and chi surged in his chest, threatening to spurt out. These were all trivial matters. What Lu Yi was curious about was, where did this teleportation formation lead to? Cause such a huge commotion? The teleportation formation he set up could cover a range of 300 to 400 kilometers. When he was saved by the mysterious woman at the Pai River, the formation covered a range of over 1,000 kilometers. But even when he was teleported with the mysterious woman, the commotion was far less than this one. In other words, the teleportation formation might lead to a very distant place. It might even send him thousands of kilometers away. Lu Yi instinctively guarded his mind. In the next moment, an unprecedented feeling of weightlessness came over him. It was as if he had stepped on air and was rapidly falling into a bottomless abyss. Lu Yi felt dizzy for a moment. He only heard Hupo's miserable cry before he lost consciousness. You can fall unconscious during teleportation? Lu Yi knew that things were bad, but he was powerless to stop it. Hopefully the other side is safe enough. Lu Yi lost consciousness as soon as this thought crossed his mind. Sixth brother. Sixth brother. A soft voice called out to him. The voice was filled with endless fear and unease, as well as suppressed sobs. Lu Yi slowly regained consciousness. For a moment he didn't understand his situation. Instead, a lot of unfamiliar information appeared in his mind. Soaring Dragon Realm, Feng Province, Tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa. Sixth young master. A lot of unfamiliar information mixed with his original memories surged in his mind, giving him an inexplicable sense of familiarity. He seemed to have experienced something like this before. Thinking back, he suddenly remembered where he had experienced something like this before. The last time he entered the realm of myriad beasts. At that time, some unfamiliar information appeared in his mind. That information was related to his identity in the realm of myriad beasts. In a secret realm like the realm of beasts, many cultivators would be given an identity when they entered. This way, they would be able to better integrate into the secret realm and participate in the important events that happened inside. In the realm of myriad beasts, Lu Ye's identity was the young sect master of the myriad beast sect. He had taken refuge in Two World City with Xia Qianqian and a few other mates. It could be said that he had a very high starting point. To think that something similar would happen this time, he recalled the teleportation from before, and suddenly realized that the teleportation array didn't lead to a certain location in the Cloudy River battlefield. Instead, it had sent him into a mystic realm. No wonder the teleportation formation was so huge. At that time, he thought that he would be teleported thousands of miles away, but it seemed that was not the case. Although he had regained consciousness, Lu Ye's body was extremely tired. The teleportation array had drained all the spiritual energy in his body, aggravating his previous injuries, and after experiencing such a huge teleportation, Lu Ye felt that his entire body was shrouded in indescribable weakness. He was not in a hurry to open his eyes. Instead, he sorted out the information that appeared in his mind. This was a place called the Soaring Dragon Realm. It was said that there were traces of a true dragon there. The tyrannical saber villa was the force that Lu Ye came from. In the entire Soaring Dragon Realm, it could be considered a tyrant. The lord of the tyrannical saber villa, Ying, started from scratch and single-handedly built up a huge family business. His personal strength was extremely strong, and he had 6 sons and 1 daughter, all of whom were dragons and phoenixes among men. Originally, such a force could be passed down for many generations without decline. However, a few days ago bad news came. The pillar of the tyrannical saber villa, Yi Ying, had mysteriously died. Then the tyrannical saber villa was attacked by a group of people who hid their identities. The disciples of the tyrannical saber villa either died or fled. Of Yi Ying's 6 sons and 1 daughter, 5 died on the spot. Only Lu Yi, the 6th Yi, and the 7th Yi Liuli escaped. The brother and sister supported each other and escaped into Hua Yin Mountain. Now they had reached their limit. Lu Yi sighed in his heart. What the hell was the unfathomable Tianji up to? Last time, he was the young sect master of the realm of myriad beasts. This time, he could barely be considered the young lord of the tyrannical saber villa. His background was not bad. But the key problem was that the Thousand Beast sect was destroyed last time, and this time the tyrannical saber villa was attacked. History was always surprisingly similar. 6th brother. The sorrowful cry of a young girl sounded in his ears. Then Lu Yi felt a finger under his nose, as if testing his breath to see if he was dead or not. His injuries were originally caused by the relapse of his old injuries caused by the teleportation. In addition, the burden brought about by the teleportation was added. However, in the Soaring Dragon Realm, the injuries he had sustained when he was fighting with the enemy in the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa were still manageable. Liuli. Lu Yi opened his eyes and called out weakly. 6th brother. Yi Liuli's originally gloomy eyes blossomed with light. In just a few days, her family was destroyed, and she fell from the high and mighty young miss of the tyrannical Saber Villa to a stray dog fleeing in panic. For Yi Liuli, who had always been pampered, this was tantamount to turning the world upside down. Now, she only had Lu Yi as her family left. If Lu Yi also died, then she really didn't know what to do. In the end, she was just a 15-year-old girl who had never experienced the hardships of the world. She hurriedly picked up a bowl of medicine from the side, scooped it up with a spoon, and brought it to Lu Ye's mouth. She suppressed the sorrow in her heart and said, 6th brother, drink the medicine. The warm medicine poured into Lu Ye's mouth, full of bitterness. He didn't know if this medicine had any effect, but Lu Yi was now exhausted and couldn't even move a finger, so he could only let her do as she wished. After drinking the medicine, Lu Yi became more and more tired. He said softly, I'll sleep for a while. Yi Liuli nodded. Sixth brother, you rest. I'll keep watch. The sudden change had obviously made the girl's temperament mature a lot. Lu Yi closed his eyes but didn't sleep. Instead, he quietly pondered. He also didn't expect that the teleportation array on the jade platform outside the 100 Formation Pagoda would actually teleport him into such a secret realm. It was basically certain that this secret realm had never appeared before, and no one had ever entered it before. After all, the location of the platform wasn't easy to find. Who would have thought that there would be an entrance to a secret realm in such a dangerous place? And even if they found it, Cloud River tier cultivators couldn't enter. They needed to completely repair the teleportation array on the platform before they could be teleported in. That damaged teleportation array was like a test. Only those who passed the test had the right to enter here. In the entire Cloud River battlefield apart from Lu Yi, no one else could repair the teleportation array. Since he was already here, he might as well make the best of it. Strictly speaking, the secret realms that Lu Yi had experienced were only the Immortal Essence City and the Realm of Beasts. This was his third secret realm. In places like secret realms there were many dangers but also great opportunities. Cultivators loved to explore these places. Although he had accidentally entered this place, Lu Yi wasn't in a hurry to leave. Who knew he might be able to gain something here? Hu Po was gone when he was teleported. Hu Po was crouched on his shoulder, but now he wasn't beside him. That didn't matter. Last time in the Realm of Beasts, Hu Po wasn't beside him at the beginning. He could sense his battlefield imprint, so he should be able to contact Yi. What was worth thinking about was what he should do in this secret realm. Generally speaking, when cultivators entered a large-scale secret realm with the background of a world, they would only enter when something big happened in the secret realm. For example, last time in the Realm of Beasts, the entire secret realm was destroyed. Cultivators, on the other hand, also had an invisible mission to fulfill. Of course, this task wasn't directly given by Tianji. Instead, cultivators had to figure it out themselves. In the Realm of Beasts, cultivators had to resist the beast tide and solve the problem at the source. From there, they could gain a lot of battle merits. And that time in the Immortal Fox Valley, although it wasn't a secret realm, Lu Yi had killed the evil fox demon, which was equivalent to solving a hidden danger in the Cloud River battlefield. Immediately after, Tianji had given him a reward. So what should he do in the Dragon Soaring realm? What big things happened in the Dragon Soaring realm recently? He didn't have many clues for now. Although there was a lot of unfamiliar information about this realm in his mind, Lu Yi wasn't the real sixth young master Yi. He was just an outsider and didn't know much about this realm. Moreover, the most important thing right now was to solve the current crisis. Tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa had been destroyed, and sixth young master Ye's brothers had all died in battle. Only he and Yi Liuli had escaped under the protection of the villa's loyal servants. However, this didn't mean they were safe. If you cut the grass without removing the roots, it would grow again. Presumably, someone was chasing after him, and Yi Liuli at this moment. He had to quickly get in touch with Yi. With his current body, the strength he could use was limited. Yi Liuli's strength wasn't high either. She seemed to have just entered the Cloud River tier. Moreover, running all the way had consumed a lot of her energy. It was hard to say how much strength she could use now. With Yi and Hupa protecting him, he would be safe. Thinking this, Lu Yi raised his hand and tapped on his battlefield imprint, sending a message. Soon Yi replied. She and Hupa were currently in a deep mountain forest, but it was hard to pinpoint their exact location. It seemed that their luck wasn't bad. Yi and Hupa were also in this Huayin mountain. However, if they wanted to meet up with Lu Yi, it would probably take some time. Liuli, Lu Yi called out softly again. Yi Liuli, who was so weak that she almost fell asleep, immediately raised her head. The tears on her face hadn't dried, and her eyes were bloodshot. I'm here, sixth brother. What are the characteristics of the place we're at? Yi Liuli didn't know why her sixth brother was concerned about this at this time. After thinking for a moment, she said, I randomly found a cave. There's a wild date tree outside. Does that count as a characteristic? What else? What's the terrain nearby? Yi Liuli thought carefully, then gave a simple description of the nearby terrain. I understand, Lu Yi replied, and transmitted the information he had received to Yi. Yi Liuli looked at Lu Yi suspiciously, but saw that her sixth brother had closed his eyes again. She could only suppress the doubts in her heart and ask no more. Chapter 684. In the cave, when Lu Yi opened his eyes again, Yi Liuli had already fallen asleep against the rock wall. Ever since the fall of the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa, she had been in a state of panic for the past few days. Coupled with the fact that she and Lu Yi had been on the run for several days without rest, she was already on the verge of death. The young girl's face was still childish and she wore a purple dress, but what should have been a luxurious color was now covered in a large patch of dark red. It was the color of blood. She had not taken care of herself for several days, so her little face was dirty and her hair was messy. It was unknown what she was dreaming of, but her brows were tightly knitted and her expression was nervous and uneasy. In the darkness, she suddenly opened her eyes and met Lu Ye's eyes. The young girl's expression became nervous. Sixth brother. Sh. Lu Yi raised a finger and put it to his lips. Yi Liuli nodded. There was some movement outside, like the sound of something breaking through the air. It was these subtle movements that woke the young girl from her sleep. Although her cultivation was not as good as Lu Ye's, she had still entered the Cloud River realm and her perception was still quite good. There seems to be a cave here, let's go in and take a look. A voice came from outside. Yi Liuli's expression suddenly became nervous. With her and Lu Ye's current state, once they were discovered, there would be no way for them to survive. But it was too late to hide now. She only hated herself for being so useless, falling asleep at such a critical moment. If she had detected the enemy earlier, she might have had a chance to survive. But it was useless to be upset. She grabbed the saber at her side, forced herself to stand up, and stood in front of Lu Yi. The name of the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa came from Yi Ying. The word tyrannical was not because of his personality, but because of the extremely fierce and domineering saber techniques he cultivated. Yi Ying's children had been influenced from a young age, and naturally cultivated saber techniques of the same origin. Yi Liuli's saber and Lu Ye's mountain pan saber looked similar in both shape and size. Although the young girl's body was petite and she had always been pampered, at this moment she had an awareness that she had never had before. Her sixth brother was seriously injured and could not fight. Now that her position had been exposed, she could only kill the enemy to temporarily be safe. Even if she died, she would die in front of her sixth brother. Just as the young girl was ready, a figure suddenly rushed in. It was a man in green. Looking at his travel-worn appearance, it was obvious that he had not had a good rest for several days. Before he could clearly see the situation inside the cave, a blade light had already spread out in his field of vision. This blade was like a fierce tiger descending the mountain, like a flood dragon emerging from the sea. When the blade came out, it was incomparably fierce. It was hard to imagine that a petite woman like Yi Liuli could display such a domineering saber technique. Suddenly attacked, the green-robed man's expression changed. He hurriedly brandished the long sword in his hand, turning it into a sword screen that enveloped Yi Liuli. At the same time, he shouted anxiously, "Here!" It would have been fine if he had focused on fighting the enemy, but he had to shout at such a critical moment, which unknowingly weakened his own momentum. Spirit energy surged and collided, and the blade light slashed into the continuous sword curtain. Accompanied by a shrill scream, the azure-robed man who had rushed in flew out in a sorry state. The opponent's cultivation was not much different from Yi Liuli's. Based on Yi Liuli's current state, logically speaking, she was not his opponent. However, the saber techniques of the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa had always been fierce and domineering. They were known for the weak defeating the strong. In addition, Yi Liuli had the will to protect her with her life, and the opponent was just following orders. This encounter had caused her to severely injure him. Yi Liuli's eyes lit up. Just as she was about to take advantage of the opportunity to kill the opponent, a figure flashed in front of her. Another person appeared, and a fist wearing a boxing glove broke through the air from the darkness, shattering her blade light. A copious amount of energy was released and she was sent flying. It was clear that there was more than one enemy chasing after her. There were several of them. However, the cave was narrow. The azure-robed man who had been severely injured by Yi Liuli was the first to enter, followed by this cultivator wearing a boxing glove. There were 3 others guarding the cave entrance and did not enter. Later on, this person's chi and blood surged. He was tall and sturdy, clearly a body cultivator. In such a narrow cave, encountering such a body cultivator was undoubtedly the most despairing thing. Yi struggled to get up. Blood flowed from the corner of her mouth, but she still stood in front of Lu Yi. The saber in her hand was slightly raised, ready to meet the enemy. The body cultivator who came in later swept his eyes over them. He saw the blood at the corner of Yi Liuli's mouth, and also saw the weak Lu Yi lying behind her. He lightly snorted. The dignified 6th young master Yi, 7th young Miss Yi, actually fell to such a state one day. How sad, how lamentable. Who are you people? Yi Liuli clenched her teeth and shouted. This was the most tragic thing in the world. Her family had been destroyed, and she didn't even know who had done it. What's the point of asking this now? The body cultivator indifferently looked at Yi Liuli. We were only paid to help. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame your old man for provoking someone he shouldn't have. It was impossible to infer much from these words. It could only be said that Yi Ying had provoked some powerful enemy. Not only had he been killed, but his children had also been implicated. The great family business that he had built up his entire life had disappeared like smoke. Moreover, the other party clearly didn't intend to say much to Yi Liuli. Or rather, they didn't know much. 7th young Miss Yi, seeing that your old man is also someone important, you can kill 6th young master Yi and then kill yourself. This way we can go back and report. Yi Liuli clenched her teeth. In your dreams. The body cultivator lowered his eyes. Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Letting you kill yourself is only to lessen your pain. If you really make us do it, what you will encounter won't be as simple as death. Yi Liuli seemed to understand something. Her eyes immediately revealed great fear. Even the breath that she had been holding couldn't help but dissipate. Although she was the pampered young miss of the tyrannical Saber Villa, she had heard of many beautiful women who had encountered many misfortunes. She had never thought that such a thing would happen to her one day. If that was really the case, then she might as well die. Good chance. Although the body cultivator said that he wanted Yi Liuli to kill herself, in reality, he had been looking for an opportunity to make a move. Although his cultivation was much higher than Yi Liuli's and he didn't think that Yi Liuli could pose any threat to him in this situation, he was naturally a cautious person. He knew what kind of potential a person could erupt in a desperate situation. The invisible threat in his words caused Yi Liuli's mind to become chaotic. If she didn't make a move now, when would she? With a single step, spiritual energy surged around his body. The body cultivator rushed towards Yi Liuli like an arrow released from a bow. His tall and sturdy figure formed a sharp contrast with the young girl's delicate appearance. This attack was like a falcon hunting a rabbit. Facing this attack that had been accumulating power for a long time, how could Yi Liuli, who had new injuries added to her old injuries, block it? However, she didn't retreat a single step and continued to guard in front of Lu Yi. Feeling the powerful spiritual energy fluctuations and majestic aura from the enemy, Yi Liuli knew that this time, it was going to be a disaster. With such a powerful enemy, even if she cultivated bitterly for another 2 or 3 years, she might not be a match, let alone now. She couldn't be captured alive by him. Even if she died at his hands, she absolutely couldn't be captured alive by him. Thinking so, Yi Liuli's eyes filled with the will to die. However, at that moment, a figure suddenly flashed from behind her, followed by a flash of light. What? The body cultivator exclaimed. All his attention was on Yi Liuli, so for a moment, he didn't see when another person had appeared in front of her. Then what came into view was a sharp, fiery red saber light. Ha! A great sense of crisis enveloped his body and mind. The body cultivator roared and raised his fist to meet the saber light. His vitality boiled and his spiritual energy surged, covering his fist in a layer of pink light. The saber light continued to fall, and at that moment there seemed to be several saber cries, but it also seemed like there was only one. The pink light suddenly shattered and the sharp saber light cut through his fist, severing half of his arm. Ah! This time it was both a cry of alarm and a scream of pain. He was a body cultivator, and his cultivation was at the 7th order. Although he wasn't at the top in the entire soaring dragon realm, it was still not bad. He never thought that there would be someone in this world who could break through the defense he was so proud of. Was the saber techniques of tyrannical saber mountain villa so fierce? Another flash of blade light blossomed and slashed horizontally. The body cultivator hurriedly retracted his fist and raised his arms in front of his body. The blade light cut through his elbows like tofu. Following the flash of the blade light, 2 severed arms flew out. The body cultivator staggered back, blood spurting out from the 2 severed arms. All these changes made his mind chaotic. Only now did he realize that a figure had appeared in front of him. It was 6th young Master Yi, who had been lying on the ground. This brat tricked me. Such a thought surged in the body cultivator's mind. When he came in, he saw Lu Yi lying there in a half-dead posture, so he didn't take him seriously. In his opinion, as long as he got rid of Yi Liuli, this mission would be completed. Who would have thought that 6th young Master Yi, who he had ignored, would have such strength? Lu Yi was shorter than him, and at first glance, Lu Yi seemed to have bumped into him. The mountain saber in his hand stabbed upwards, the sharp blade piercing through the body cultivator's jaw and into his brain. Haha! The body cultivator's eyes widened in anger as he made meaningless sounds. His body spasmed, and as Lu Yi pulled his saber out, blood spurted out. He fell to the ground and soon stopped moving. In this short 2 breaths of time, not only did Yi Liuli freeze in shock, but even the blue-clothed man who was the first to enter was dumbfounded. It wasn't until his companion was killed and Lu Yi looked over that he cried out in alarm and hurriedly retreated. But how could it be too late to leave? The weapon box at Lu Ye's waist buzzed, and 9 streams of light shot out one after another, breaking through the opponent's protective spirit energy and piercing several holes in his body. After that person fell out, there was no longer any sign of life. Chapter 685. Inside the small cave, the corpses of the 2 pursuers lay on the ground, filling the air with a strong smell of blood. Yi Liuli stared at her 6th brother's figure in shock. His familiar silhouette gave her a strange feeling. This feeling made her a little flustered, but she didn't know what was going on. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, Lu Ye's figure suddenly staggered, his long saber stabbing into the ground to prevent him from falling. After arriving here through the hidden transmission array outside the 100 formation tower, his spirit chi had been depleted. But this wasn't a big deal as he still had the energy stored in his storage ring. However, the weakness of his body couldn't be resolved in a short time. He had been lying there motionless before to restore his strength as much as possible, but at the same time to show weakness to his enemies. After successfully killing the 2 pursuers, the little bit of strength he had recovered with great difficulty was almost exhausted. 6th brother. Yi Liuli hurriedly stepped forward and supported Lu Yi. Lu Yi shook his head, motioning her not to make a sound. Brother Lu, Brother Zhao? The shout of the pursuers came from outside. There were a total of 5 people chasing after them. 2 people had entered the cave while the other 3 stood guard outside, preventing Lu Yi and Yi Liuli from escaping. This was undoubtedly a very safe arrangement. But what the 3 people guarding outside never expected was that their 2 companions who had charged into the cave would actually meet with misfortune in such a short period of time. How could such a thing happen? Although the cultivation of the 2 Yi family brats wasn't weak, they were both injured and running for their lives. These past few days must have consumed a lot of their strength. How much strength could they possibly display? Moreover, even if they were unharmed, it was impossible for them to kill their 2 companions in such a short time. One of them was a 7th order body cultivator. How could they be so easy to kill? For a moment, the 3 men guarding the cave entrance even thought that there was some other master hiding in the cave. The death of their 2 companions made them vigilant, and no one dared to rashly enter the cave. Just as they were at their wits' end, a sudden movement came from the side. Who is it? One of them shouted angrily. He turned around and saw a snow-white little beast strolling out from behind a tree. That little beast looked like a tiger cub that hadn't grown up yet. On its forehead there was a small king character that made people want to dote on it. If they encountered such a strange beast under normal circumstances, the 3 of them would definitely think of a way to capture it. Although this little beast was small, the aura emitted from its body was not weak. If they could capture it and sell it, it would definitely be a considerable income. But at this moment, their main goal was to chase after Lu Yi and Yulioli. Two of their companions had already died. At such a critical moment, how could they be willing to cause more trouble? Therefore, one of them immediately shouted at the snow-white little beast, "Get lost!" At the same time, he activated his aura in an attempt to scare the other party away. However, what made him stunned was that not only did the snow-white little beast not retreat, it instead opened its mouth and roared at him. "Ah, little evil beast." The man cursed, but in the next moment, his expression changed drastically. He sensed a fierce spirit chi fluctuation coming from behind him. Hurriedly turning his head, he saw an arc of light appear in front of him, cutting through the void and emitting a sizzling sound. In that direction, the figure of a young girl had appeared at some point. The girl didn't look very old, only about 15 or 16 years old. She was petite, but the aura coming from her body was actually at the 6th order Cloud River realm. Moreover, she's a magic cultivator. Where did she come from? The three of them hurriedly tried to defend themselves, but the spirit chi she used was endless and the speed at which she switched between them was extremely fast. For a time, the three of them were overwhelmed. The three of them were greatly shaken. There was also a magic cultivator among them, but regardless of his cultivation, his casting speed couldn't be compared to this girl who had suddenly appeared. After finally stabilizing their footing, one of the weapon cultivators was about to rush out and counterattack, but at that moment a fishy wind blew behind him, causing him to feel a great sense of alarm. Turning his head, he saw a huge tiger head appear in front of him, its mouth wide open, its sharp fangs gleaming with a cold light. Ah! The weapon cultivator was shocked, never having expected that the cute little snow-white critter from before would undergo such a drastic change. Hurriedly turning around, he threw the spirit artifact in his hand towards the huge tiger head. Thunk! A loud sound rang out, but the powerful blow failed to even break through the monster chi barrier around the tiger head. Instead, the weapon cultivator felt a sharp pain in his arm as it was bitten off. At that moment, two more figures rushed out of the cave, Lu Yi and Yulioli. Yi and Hupa had been searching for Lu Yi nearby, and although Yulioli had provided them with the terrain and some nearby features, it was still not easy to find him. However, the battle just now had caused some commotion, allowing Yi to lock onto Lu Ye's position and hurriedly rush over with Hupa to provide support. They had come at the right time, otherwise, if these three people had rushed into the cave recklessly, with Lu Yi and Yulioli's current state, they really wouldn't have been able to resist. Just now, he had attacked violently and killed the two cultivators chasing after him, which was already his limit. The battle outside the cave broke out in a hurry and ended quickly. Yi and Hupo's cooperation was flawless, and with the addition of Lu Yi and Yulioli, the battle immediately turned into a one-sided situation. In just a dozen breaths, there were three more corpses on the ground. Lu Yi gasped for breath, his face pale. Hupo was licking a wound on his paw. The wound was very small, and only a little bit of blood flowed out. Since following Lu Yi until now, Hupa had actually rarely participated in battles. Most of the time, he would crouch on Lu Ye's shoulder, letting him borrow strength. It wasn't that he didn't want to participate in battles, but the enemies Lu Yi encountered were mostly several levels higher than him. In such battles, Hupa couldn't play a big role, so it was better to let Lu Yi borrow strength. However, this didn't mean that Hupa had no fighting strength. Following Lu Yi, Hupa relied on the chi and blood in the dragon scales to nourish his body all year round, so his physique was also extremely strong. Usually, he looked like a cute little critter, but when he revealed his true form, he was a ferocious beast. Hupa was the white tiger, one of the 4 sacred beasts that focused on killing. Yi and Yulioli looked at each other. The two girls looked about the same age, and even their figures were somewhat similar. They were both petite, so if they stood together, people who didn't know them would probably think that they were sisters. The two girls' eyes reflected each other's figures, and the same thought appeared in their minds at the same time. Who is this guy? The atmosphere was inexplicably subtle, and even Hupa felt it, licking his paw even more seriously. Collect their things and leave this place first, Lu Yi said. Yi and Yulioli moved at the same time. One was responsible for collecting the 3 people outside, while the other rushed back into the cave to collect the two people inside. Not long after, a snow-white figure shuttled through the forest. Lu Yi sat on the tiger's back, and in front of him was Yi Liuli. Yi's cheeks puffed up as she flew to the side. The little girl's lungs were about to explode from anger. "That's my position." She glanced at Yi Liuli from time to time, then quickly averted her gaze. If it weren't for the fact that she didn't want to expose the secret of her spiritual body, she would have hidden back into Hu Po's body. Out of sight, out of mind. Sixth brother, what's up with this strange beast and this big sister? She could tell that Lu Yi was very familiar with the girl who'd suddenly appeared. Even the white tiger was very close to Lu Yi. But as far as she knew, her sixth brother had never had such a friend. However, she could sense that the girl seemed to have some inexplicable hostility towards her. "He's a friend I made during my travels here," Lu Yi explained. "I'm an outsider now." He felt wronged. But for better or for worse, she'd explored the realm of Beast's secret realm with Lu Yi. She knew that Lu Yi had a natural identity in a secret realm with a great world as its backdrop. Although she didn't know what Lu Ye's identity here was, it seemed that he had a close relationship with the girl. It couldn't be that kind of relationship, right? Yi couldn't help but let her imagination run wild. The atmosphere fell silent, and Yi Liuli didn't ask any more questions. Lu Yi seized the time to recover, while Yi sullenly flew away. Hoopa ran even faster. "I'm a tiger, so what does it have to do with me?" He didn't know how many people were chasing after Lu Yi and Yi Liuli, but it couldn't be too many since they were already in bad shape. Moreover, this kind of pursuit was nothing compared to what Lu Yi had encountered in the Cloud River battlefield. So the situation wasn't that bad. More than 2 hours later, in a hidden valley, Hoopa came to a stop. Lu Yi jumped down and found a place to set up a few simple spirit arrays to conceal everyone's location. Although he was an arrow at the end of its flight, the trip to the 100 Formation Pagoda had greatly increased his cultivation of formations. Even if he'd only casually set them up, the formations he'd set up weren't something ordinary cultivators could see through. This way he had time to catch his breath. As long as he could recover fully, he'd be completely free of danger. As for what to do next, he didn't have a clue for now. He could only take it one step at a time. After exhorting Yi and Yi Liuli, Lu Yi walked to the side and sat down cross-legged. Hoopa returned to his little beast form and lay down to nap. Yi Liuli was also recovering, but her condition was much better than Lu Ye's, so she woke up before him. She looked at Yi, who was on guard, thought for a moment, then walked to Yi's side and sat down. Yi looked at her blankly. The grievance in the little girl's heart hadn't dissipated, so she wasn't in the mood to talk to Yi Liuli. Moreover, she'd been traveling extensively with Lu Yi, so although she looked similar to Yi Liuli in terms of age and figure, she was much more mature than Yi Liuli in terms of mentality. She could tell at a glance that Yi Liuli was a pampered little girl who hadn't experienced much hardship. "Sister-in-law," Yi Liuli called out tentatively. What?" Yi's calm expression suddenly became flustered, almost suspecting that she'd misheard. To be continued. Chapter 686. It had to be said that women were born with a wondrous intuition, no matter how young they were. Along the way, Yi Liuli could feel that Yi's attitude towards her wasn't very friendly. Although she lived like a princess, how could she not figure out the crux of the matter? Seeing Yi's reaction, Yi Liuli pursed her lips and smiled. "Looks like I'm right." She was even more certain of her guess. According to what she knew, her sixth brother did often travel to Huayan Mountain, but now it seemed that the trip was fake, and he really did come to visit this girl. Otherwise, he wouldn't have risked his life to come save her today. "No, it's not what you think." Yi hurriedly waved her hands. She secretly glanced at Lu Yi, who was recuperating, and explained guiltily, I'm Lu Yi's younger sister." She didn't know what Lu Ye's name was in this secret realm, so it wasn't convenient for her to say it out loud. "Younger sister?" Yi Liuli pursed her lips and smiled. "What a coincidence, I'm also his younger sister. His biological younger sister. She's probably not the same as his younger sister." Yi finally understood the relationship between Lu Yi and Yi Liuli, but seeing Yi Liuli's appearance, she knew she couldn't resolve the misunderstanding. She sighed inwardly and decided not to waste her breath. Half a day later, when Lu Yi opened his eyes again, he saw a shocking scene. He saw Yi leaning her head on Yi's shoulder, weeping like a pear blossom in the rain. Yi was halfway up, constantly comforting her. What was going on? Lu Yi was confused. He could understand Yi's reaction. The sudden change of events, the destruction of her family, was a huge blow to the eldest miss of tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa. But the two girls clearly didn't seem to get along before, so why did they seem to be much closer now? Sensing that Lu Yi had woken up, Yi wiped her eyes, stood up and called out, "Sixth brother." Lu Yi nodded slightly. "Sixth brother, what should we do now?" Yi asked. Although they had temporarily escaped disaster, the danger was still there. Who knew when someone would come after them? Moreover, she hadn't experienced many storms, so she really didn't know what to do. Lu Yi thought for a moment, then said, "Take out the things we collected before." Yi and Yi hurriedly took out a few storage pouches. Lu Yi unlocked the storage pouches and took out the items inside. "This is..." Yi suddenly picked up one of the items that looked like a token. She looked it over and gritted her teeth. Divine Will Sect's identity token. In other words, at least 3 of the 5 people chasing after them were cultivators from the Divine Will Sect. The Divine Will Sect and the domineering Saber Mountain Villa both belonged to the Feng province and were not too far from each other. However, their relationship had never been harmonious. The reason was that the current sect master of the Divine Will Sect had suffered a great loss at the hands of Yi Ying when he was young. What was the origin of the grudges of the previous generation? It could no longer be verified, but this accumulated resentment had been left behind. According to the information Lu Yi had obtained, the tyrannical Saber Mountain Manor and the Divine Will Sect often had some friction. However, the general situation in the Soaring Dragon Realm was different from that in the 9 states. This kind of friction was normal. In the 9 states, the Haotian Alliance and the Wanemo Ridge had clear boundaries and were at odds with each other for thousands of years. Under normal circumstances, the sects that belonged to the same camp would help each other at critical moments. There was not much resentment between them. Although the Soaring Dragon Realm was also full of sects and clans, the situation was much more complicated than in the 9 states. They did not belong to any camp and had many grievances. In the network of good relations between the two forces, there might be many enemies. The tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa and the Divine Will Sect already had grievances. Now that the former was in dire straits, it was normal for the latter to hit them when they were down. However, Lu Yi remembered that the body cultivator had said that he would help others if he was paid to do so. This meant that the other party did not only attack because of their grievances. Someone had asked them to help. Who could it be? Although Lu Yi had come here with the identity of 6th Young Master Yi, and had a lot of general information about the Soaring Dragon Realm in his mind, he did not know the specific information. There was also Yi Ying, who died mysteriously. The Soaring Dragon Realm was similar to the realm of beasts that he had been to previously, but there were also differences. The similarity was that the highest achievement of the cultivators in these 2 realms was the Cloud River Realm. There were no cultivators above the Cloud River Realm in the entire realm. The difference was that the realm of beasts was limited by the heavens and earth. Cultivators could only cultivate up to the Cloud River Realm. There was no way to cultivate further. This might be related to the environment of the entire realm. Although there was abundant spiritual power, the rules of the heavens and earth could not accommodate it. It could not even allow cultivators to explore further. Just like how the Spirit Stream battlefield could not accommodate cultivators above the Spirit Stream realm. However, the Soaring Dragon Realm was not like this in the beginning. According to the information that Lu Yi had obtained, there were Divine Ocean Realm cultivators in the Soaring Dragon Realm a long time ago. However, since the appearance of a ravine in the extreme north 800 years ago, everything began to change slowly. As time passed, the Divine Ocean Realm cultivators found that their cultivation did not increase but decreased instead. They gradually fell to the level of True Lake Realm. 500 years ago, there were no Divine Ocean Realm cultivators in the entire Soaring Dragon Realm. This situation continued to worsen. After another 300 years, there were no more True Lake Realm cultivators in the Soaring Dragon Realm. Therefore, the current Soaring Dragon Realm only had Cloud River Realm cultivators. Previously, Lu Yi did not have time to think about this information that he had suddenly obtained. Now that he thought about it, Lu Yi felt that it was inconceivable. What was the reason that caused the cultivation of the entire Soaring Dragon Realm's cultivators to continuously decrease? This situation gave Lu Yi a feeling. If this realm was compared to a balloon, then the size of the balloon was the size of the realm. The larger the balloon, the higher the upper limit that cultivators could reach. However, for some reason, the size of the balloon that was the Soaring Dragon Realm was slowly shrinking. This caused the upper limit that cultivators could reach to become lower and lower. From the Divine Ocean Realm to the True Lake Realm. From the True Lake Realm to the Cloud River Realm. Perhaps in another few hundred years, there would only be a group of Spirit Stream Realm cultivators left in the Soaring Dragon Realm. If it was even longer, there might not even be any cultivators left. All these changes started from the inexplicable appearance of the heavenly ravine. The entire Soaring Dragon Realm's environment was like this. It could be seen as a corner of the Cloud River battlefield. Ying was a Cloud River Realm 9th Order cultivator. Moreover, his Tyrant Saber technique was strong and powerful. It was impossible for him to suddenly die unless he was ambushed and killed. There was a high probability that the Divine Will sect was involved in this matter. Let's recuperate first, then think of a way to take revenge, Lu Yi said. Revenge had to be taken. It was not that Lu Yi acknowledged his identity as the 6th young master of Yi, or that he had deep feelings for the domineering Saber Mountain Villa. After all, he was an outsider. It was just that this might be a test from the heavens. Now that he was the 6th young master of Yi, he naturally had to act according to this identity. Moreover, he was very interested in the Tyrant Saber Mountain Villa's Tyrant Saber technique. All along, he had been suffering from the fact that he could only explore his own saber technique. No one could teach him how to cultivate it. If he could recapture the Tyrant Saber Mountain Villa, not only would he have a place to stay in the Soaring Dragon Realm in the future, he could also comprehend the Tyrant Saber technique. This Tyrant Saber technique was not created by Yi Ying. He had obtained it from an ancient ruin. It was unknown which era of the Soaring Dragon Realm it was, or which sect had left it behind. If it was really a saber technique created by a Cloud River Realm cultivator, Lu Yi might not be interested. Maybe Yi Ying's attainments in saber technique were not as good as his. However, since it was obtained from an ancient ruin, it was worth looking at. Moreover, he had seen Yi Liuli's attack before. That petite body had erupted with such an overbearing aura. This Tyrant Saber technique was obviously extraordinary. His own saber technique was also refined and fierce. It was quite similar to the Tyrant Saber technique. In addition, the Tyrant Saber Mountain Villa did not only have the Tyrant Saber technique. Since Ying established the Tyrant Saber Mountain Villa, he had collected many things about saber techniques. These things were all things that Lu Yi desired. Originally, he was a little dissatisfied that Heaven's Secret had arranged for him to have his family destroyed and be hunted down. However, he did not have such thoughts now. Heaven's Secret's arrangement was very reasonable. He cultivated the saber technique, so he was arranged to be 6th young master Yi. Okay. Yi Liuli, whose eyes were red, gritted her teeth and agreed. The hatred in her heart was real. Although she did not know who was the main culprit behind the destruction of the Tyrant Saber Mountain Villa, it was not wrong to count the Divine Will sect in. The hatred of her family had become the motivation for her cultivation to become stronger. One day later in Huayan Mountain, a few cultivators were resting. They were talking. Those two little bastards are really good at hiding. They have not shown themselves until now. They had gone deep into this place, reading books and chasing after Lu Yi and Yi Liuli. However, until now they had not even seen a shadow. No one knew where they were hiding. Previously, we lost contact with a group of people. We don't know what danger they encountered. Everyone, please be careful. This Huayan Mountain is not a good place. The person who spoke suddenly turned his head and shouted, "It's okay. Although there are many ferocious beasts in this mountain, as long as we work together, who is there?" At the same time, the cultivators who were talking also stood up and looked in that direction vigilantly. Light footsteps were heard. Under the moonlight, two figures, one tall and one short, slowly walked out of the night sky. Seeing the faces of the people who came, the cultivators were all overjoyed. "It's you two little bastards. Ha ha ha, this is really a case of wearing out iron shoes in a fruitless search. only to find it without any effort. They were just worrying about how to find Lu Yi and Yi Liuli. They did not expect that the two of them would take the initiative to come to their door. Beside Lu Yi, Yi Liuli looked nervous. Her knuckles turned slightly white as she held the saber hilt. In her perception, any one of these cultivators had a higher cultivation than her and her sixth brother. It was obviously not a good idea to show up so openly. However, since her sixth brother chose to do so, she could only follow. Chapter 687. After a day of recuperation, Lu Yi had completely recovered. Yi Liuli's recovery ability wasn't as terrifying as his, but at least she was fine. The two of them prepared to leave for Tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa tomorrow morning to take revenge. When they were resting at night, Yi, who was on guard nearby, discovered the figures of these cultivators. That was why Lu Yi brought Yi Liuli to find them. Their brazen appearance caused the cultivators to be overjoyed. They all knew about Yi Lu and Yi Liuli's cultivation. One was at the 6th Order Cloud River realm, while the other had just broken through to the Cloud River realm. None of them were inferior to the Yi siblings in terms of cultivation, so they didn't think that the siblings would pose any threat to them. When they discovered the siblings, they all stood up and rushed over to kill them. Take care of yourself. Yi Liuli was still nervous when her sixth brother's voice rang in her ears. Then, she saw her sixth brother's figure turn into an afterimage and crash into the enemy's formation like a fierce tiger. Under the moonlight, a bright saber light cut through the night sky like a meteor, and a rain of blood suddenly fell. Screams followed. Yi Liuli stared at her sixth brother's figure in a daze, as if she was in a dream. Tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa's Villa Master Ying had 6 sons and 1 daughter. All of them were outstanding talents, dragons and phoenixes among men, but there was no conclusion as to which one of them was the most talented. Among them, Yi Lu had been traveling outside since he was 16, and on average, he only returned to Tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa once or twice a year. Search. Therefore, even if Lu Ye's current identity was Yi Liuli's sixth brother, Yi Liuli wasn't too clear about his strength. Previously in the cave, Lu Yi suddenly attacked and killed a 7th Order body cultivator with 3 saber strikes, which made Yi Liuli feel incredulous. But at that time she didn't think too much about it, only thinking that her sixth brother had used some kind of desperate secret technique. But now it seemed that it was her sixth brother's true ability, not some kind of secret technique. In her vision, her sixth brother held his saber and charged forward. Even if he was facing 4 enemies whose cultivation wasn't inferior to his, he was fearless. With just 1 strike he killed one of them. That kind of invincible saber technique seemed similar to the tyrannical saber technique, but there seemed to be something different. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, a second person screamed out. His chest was cut open by a saber, and his beating heart was clearly visible. With such an injury, it was clear that he wouldn't live for long. As the saber light flashed, it was already heading towards the third person. Feeling an indescribable pressure, that person's face turned ashen and his spiritual power became somewhat stagnant. He had never encountered such a thing before. Even though it was rumored that the Tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa's tyrannical saber art was incomparably tyrannical and was best at using the weak to defeat the strong, such a performance was too exaggerated. Was Yi Lu still human? The cultivation he displayed was indeed only at the 6th Order Cloud River realm, far inferior to any of them, but under the pitch-black saber that seemed capable of swallowing even the moonlight, they were like helpless little chicks, unable to put up any resistance. All they could do was stretch out their necks and wait to be stabbed, unable to fight back at all. The strength of the spiritual energy made him feel frightened, and the speed and angle of the other party's attack was even more overwhelming. In just 2 breaths of time, the web between his thumb and forefinger had already cracked, and his spiritual energy was surging, making it difficult for him to control himself. My life is over. Just as he was thinking about this, the last person grit his teeth and rushed towards Yi Liuli. He was lucky that he hadn't been targeted by Lu Yi in time, but seeing Lu Ye's ferocity, how could he not know that he had kicked an iron plate? Now if he wanted to live, his only option was to capture Yi Liuli's 7th young lady and use her as a hostage. Yi Lu was so ferocious, but it was impossible for Yi Liuli to be the same, right? It had to be said that this person's reaction was very fast. In such a desperate situation, he had found a good way to break out of it. Seeing one of the enemies rushing towards her, how could Yi Liuli not know the other party's plan? She knew that she wasn't his opponent, but she also didn't want to cause trouble for her sixth brother. So without hesitation, she turned around and ran. At that moment, a golden arc slashed over from the side. Yi Liuli turned her head and saw Yi standing there. Spiritual energy surged between her fair hands, and as the spiritual energy surged, streaks of golden arcs shot out like they were chasing the stars and the moon. Sister-in-law. Yi Liuli was overjoyed. When she had followed Lu Yi here, he hadn't shown up because Yi had been monitoring this place and keeping in touch with Lu Yi. Now that she saw Yi's figure, she immediately rushed towards her. The word sister-in-law caused Yi to lose her breath, and the technique in her hands suddenly collapsed. Even Lu Yi, who was on the other side, suddenly slowed down his blade. Did I hear wrong? Roar! A tiger's roar echoed through the forest. Hu Po's mighty body rushed out from the side. This cultivator was already in a sorry state after being beaten by Yi's technique, and Hu Po's roar shook his mind, causing his blood to boil. By the time he came back to his senses, he had already been pushed to the ground by Hu Po. A huge tiger's head was looking down at him, a pair of tiger eyes shining with a soul-sucking light. Soul-sucking tiger's roar was Hu Po's innate ability. Back when he was in the spirit stream realm, he had helped Lu Yi quite a bit. Now that Hu Po's strength had increased, the power of this ability had increased by a lot. Even if this person was a 6th order Cloud River realm cultivator, he still couldn't tell east from west from the tiger's roar. He still wanted to resist, but a figure had already slowly appeared in his field of vision, holding a blood-stained saber. With a light swing, the saber returned to its scabbard. There were no sounds of fighting nearby, nor were there any screams. The battle had already ended. This cultivator was horrified. How could he not know that his 3 companions had all been killed? 6th young Lord Ye's strength was far beyond everyone's imagination. Even a 9th order Cloud River realm cultivator wouldn't be able to match such strength. 6th young Lord, please spare my life. Being a fish on the chopping block, this person begged for mercy without any hesitation. Under the night sky, Lu Yi looked down at the cultivator in front of him and said calmly, "If you want to live, then prove your worth. If 6th young Lord has any questions, this Su will tell you everything he knows. I only ask that 6th young Lord spare my life." This person's mind was still very sharp. He knew that the reason he didn't die wasn't because Lu Yi couldn't kill him, but because Lu Yi wanted to keep him alive to ask some questions. This could be seen from his action of wanting to take down Yi Liuli when he saw that the situation wasn't good. But words are no guarantee. 6th young Lord still needs to swear a great heart demon oath. This person naturally wouldn't believe the promise from Lu Ye's mouth. There was no such thing as a heaven's secret oath in the Soaring Dragon realm, but a great heart demon oath was similar. The binding force wasn't too strong, but it was still better than nothing. If 6th young Lord isn't willing, then kill me. After he finished speaking, he closed his eyes and assumed a posture of accepting death. His attitude was both soft and hard. It had to be said that this person's reaction to a crisis was sufficient. However, from the other party's uneasy and nervous expression, he wasn't as calm as he showed. Good. Lu Yi didn't waste any time and immediately swore a great heart demon oath. Can you speak now? This cultivator surnamed Su didn't expect Lu Yi to be so straightforward. For a moment he wasn't too used to it. However, Lu Yi had indeed swore a great heart demon oath. If he dared to ask again at this time, he was afraid that he would really be chopped to death. May I know what 6th young Lord wants to ask? After a while, Lu Ye's expression was still indifferent. On the contrary, Yi Liuli had a look of disbelief, as if she couldn't accept the information she heard. She kept shaking her head. Impossible. How could this kind of thing happen? Yi gently wrapped an arm around her shoulder. That's all I know. After the cultivator surnamed Su finished speaking, he looked at Lu Yi with apprehension. Lu Yi nodded. Then let's be on our way. The cultivator surnamed Su sensed that something was wrong. Then, a flash of saber light appeared in front of his eyes and his consciousness went completely still. Lu Yi sheathed his saber, his expression calm. "What does 6th young Lord Ye's great heart demon oath have to do with me?" Yi Luli sobbed softly, comforting Yi. Lu Yi stood in place, deep in thought. Last time when MF went to the Beast Region's secret realm, Xia Qianqian had told him that things that happened in secret realms were generally things that had happened in the past. They were reproduced through some incomprehensible method. Thus, the people they met in secret realms weren't necessarily living people. Perhaps they were just silhouettes from a certain era that outsiders like them couldn't see through. Moreover, when cultivators entered secret realms, it was usually when something major happened in the world. Lu Yi originally thought that the massacre of the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa would lead to something incredible. For example, it would affect the power structure of the Soaring Dragon realm. In the end, after hearing the cultivator surnamed Su's explanation, Lu Yi realized that he was overthinking things. If things really were as the cultivator surnamed Su said, then the destruction of the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa was merely a show of brothers reading a wall. This kind of thing obviously wasn't a big deal for an entire realm. Although it was a bit melodramatic, human nature was complex. Such things were bound to happen. Although the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa was founded by Yi Ying, it still had a second master. That second master was none other than Yi Ying's half-brother, Yi Xiong. In terms of status, he could be considered 6th young Lord Ye's second uncle. Moreover, he was his biological second uncle. When Lu Yi entered the secret realm, he obtained some simple information about this cheap second uncle. However, because 6th young Lord Yi wasn't in the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa all year round, he didn't know much about this cheap second uncle. In his impression, this guy was a very dignified middle-aged man. Yi Ying once married Madame Gua, but she passed away 3 months after giving birth to Yi Liuli. After so many years, Yi Ying never remarried. Unlike Yi Ying and his wife, who were deeply in love with each other, Yi Xiong had many wives and concubines. The two brothers didn't just have a clear contrast in marriage, they also had a clear contrast in their children. Yi Ying only married one person, but he had 6 sons and 1 daughter. Yi Xiong had many wives and concubines, but after so many years, he only had 1 son. Moreover, that son was congenitally deficient and sickly. The relationship between the two brothers wasn't too good, but it wasn't bad either. Lu Yi really couldn't figure out what had caused this kind of brothers to read a wall. Chapter 688. 10 miles away from the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa, there was a village called Everlasting Wind. Most of the farmers in the village had received the kindness of the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa, so their customs were simple and honest. Lu Yi placed Yi Liuli in a farmer's house and asked Yi and Hu Per to stay behind to look after her. He took advantage of the night and went to the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa alone. Yi Liuli fainted from the sudden change in hearing such grievous news. She had not woken up yet. He was not worried that someone would leak the secret. Although the farmers here were not cultivators, they were people who knew how to repay kindness. They had lived peacefully under the protection of the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa all these years, so they naturally recognized 6th young Master Yi and 7th young Mistress Yi. There would not be too much of a problem if Yi Liuli was placed here. Furthermore, Yi and Hu Po were protecting her. If anything happened, Yi could send a message to Lu Yi at any time. This was a convenience that the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon realm did not have. The cultivators of this realm also had communication methods, but compared to the communication methods of the cultivators of the 9 prefectures, it was far inferior. The communication methods of the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon realm mostly relied on a type of sound transmission stone. Not only could they not send too much information at once, but there was also a huge restriction on the distance. After a certain distance, they would not be able to contact each other. It was unlike the 9 prefectures, where as long as they were in the same space, they could contact each other at any time no matter how far away they were. The moon was dark and the wind was strong. Lu Yi walked towards the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa neither too fast nor too slow. He arrived very quickly. The tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa was not small. There were pavilions scattered all over the mountain villa, and there was also a man-made saber lake. Looking down from above, The shape of the lake was like a huge saber character embedded in the entire tyrannical saber mountain villa. The water in the lake could connect to every location of the mountain villa. The mountain villa was backed by a continuous mountain range. In the past, this place was also a place with beautiful scenery. However, after the battle a few days ago, this originally beautiful place had a hint of desolation. Many buildings had been destroyed. There were many figures walking back and forth in the mountain villa. These were the guards and servants of the mountain villa. Although the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa was a force, it was different from those sects and forces. Its nature was still a family force. In the previous battle, many guards and servants were killed. Some escaped, but some managed to preserve their lives and were still here. Until now. After all, even though the Manor Lord had died and his children had also died, the second Manor Lord was still alive. If it was the real sixth young Master Yi, he would naturally be extremely familiar with the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa. However, Lu Yi was an outsider after all. Even if he had some information, there were many details that he did not know. He activated the concealment and breath-restraining spiritual inscriptions to enhance himself and walked leisurely in the villa, looking for his target. A cry of alarm suddenly came from a certain direction. Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat and he headed in that direction, soon arriving outside a small courtyard. The shrill screams became clearer and clearer, as if a woman was being beaten up. Amidst the cries and begging for mercy, a voice filled with hostility could be heard. "Bitch, bitch, go to hell, cough, cough, cough." The attacker's aura was weak, and he seemed to be in poor health. He was coughing violently as he fought. Lu Yi immediately understood who this person was. It was the only son of that cheap second uncle, Yi Lang. "Young master, please spare my life. Young master, please spare my life." The beaten woman begged bitterly. However, it was completely useless. Instead, he was beaten even more viciously. Lu Yi frowned. Ever since he stepped into the cultivation world, the people he came into contact with were basically cultivators. He had basically never interacted with ordinary people. There was a clear distinction between the realms of cultivators, and it was easy to distinguish the strong from the weak. If there was a grudge between them, it would be nothing more than a life and death battle. It was rare to see such wanton bullying, which made him somewhat uncomfortable. The beating in the house suddenly stopped, and only the woman's helpless sobs could be heard. Yi Lang's voice rang out, "Liuli, don't cry. You hurt, right?" "I don't know what happened to me just now. I didn't want to hit you, cough, cough, cough. Young master, please spare my life." The woman continued to beg for mercy. Yi Lang's voice turned cold. "Why is Liuli talking to me like this? It seems that you can't teach her well. Then what's the use of having you?" The woman's voice became even more terrified. "Young master, I will learn well. I will learn well. But you are not Liuli after all." There were two soft thuds. The two guards who had been guarding outside the house fell to the ground, and the smell of blood filled the air. This strange movement stunned Yi Lang inside the house. However, he was an ordinary person who had never cultivated before, so he didn't realize what was happening outside. He opened his mouth and shouted, "What's the matter?" The door was suddenly pushed open and a figure walked in. Yi Lang was furious. "Who said you could come in?" Before he could finish his words, his face suddenly turned to one of horror as he stared in horror at the figure before him. Almost unable to believe his eyes, he pointed a finger at Lu Yi and stammered, You can't believe you're seeing Yi Lu here. Shouldn't this guy be dead?" At the door, Lu Ye's eyes swept over and saw the pale Yi Lang, and a young girl with a face full of scars kneeling at his feet. This young girl's appearance and figure at first glance looked somewhat similar to Yi Liuli. He wondered where Yi Lang found her. And from the few words he said when he beat people up, this guy seemed to have some unsettled thoughts about Yi Liuli. It was just that he didn't dare to show it before, but now he was unscrupulous. Yi Lang was congenitally deficient, and had been a sickly person since birth. Fortunately, the domineering Saber Mountain Villa wasn't an ordinary family, so they had enough resources to nourish his body. Otherwise, he would have died many years ago. But even so, he was constantly suffering from major and minor illnesses. It was precisely because he had been tortured by illness since childhood that Yi Lang's temperament was extremely twisted. When Yi Ying was in charge of the family, He didn't dare to be too presumptuous, and did many dirty things secretly. Now that Yi Ying's family had either died or fled, there was no longer any restraint, and he was completely exposed. Sixth brother, you're still alive? After a moment of shock, Yi Lang revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. Even his face was brimming with a smile from the bottom of his heart, as if he was happy for Lu Ye's survival. If father knew, he would definitely be very happy. Does father know that you're back? Yi Lang asked. Lu Yi looked at him indifferently, and his heart was filled with admiration. Such a guy, his body was already so weak, but he was still so greedy for beauty. It could be said that his will was strong, and as an ordinary person who had never cultivated, being able to have such a reaction was enough to show his temperament. Under normal circumstances, an ordinary person wouldn't have such a reaction speed. Previously, in Huayan Mountain, he had heard some information from the pursuers, but he wasn't very interested in it. He just wanted to know the whole story. After all, since he had become the sixth young master Yi, then he had to act according to his identity as the sixth young master Yi. There had to be someone to take revenge on. Now, it seemed that the information that the pursuers had revealed before they died was not wrong. The destruction of the domineering Saber Mountain Villa was indeed a show of brothers reading the wall. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense that Yi Ying's family had either died or fled, and Yi Xiong, the only son, could still live here peacefully, and even enjoy himself. Sixth brother, why are you looking at me like that? I'm your cousin. Yi Lang's expression was flustered, because the way Lu Yi looked at him was obviously a bit strange. And he didn't know why, but he always felt that his cousin gave people a very strange feeling. At this point, he opened his mouth to shout, as if he wanted to warn, but before he could say anything, a stream of light broke through the air, pierced through his mouth and went in and out of the back of his head. Since he started cultivating, Lu Yi had never killed an ordinary person. The people he killed were all cultivators of the Wanmo Ridge who wanted to harm him. In any case, Swashi was a cultivator, so it was a bit unreasonable for him to kill some mortals. But killing this Yi Lang, he didn't feel the slightest psychological pressure. The corpse fell on its back. The young girl, who looked somewhat similar to Yi Liuli, didn't react. She turned her head blankly and looked at the corpse that fell to the side. Red and white things flowing on the ground. Only then did she wake up. She turned her head and looked at Lu Yi with tears in her eyes. Sixth young master. Annoyed by Xie Ping and Tu Shaoqi, this young girl should have been a maid of the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa. The person who punched and kicked her just now died in front of her eyes, but she didn't panic. Instead, she felt relieved and happy. Today, if it wasn't for the arrival of the sixth young master, she was afraid that she would have been beaten to death. Sixth young master, leave quickly. The second manor master will be here soon. The young girl hurriedly said. Yi Xiong cherished his only son very much. Every night, he would come to see him. Although the young girl was an ordinary person and had never cultivated, she knew that the sixth young master was not the second manor master's opponent. The sixth young master killed that bastard, so how could the second manor master let it go? At that time, the sixth young master would be doomed. Oh, then I won't have to look for him. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows and changed his plan. He originally sneaked in with the intention of killing, but since the main character sent himself to the door, he didn't need to look everywhere. After all, he wasn't familiar with the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa. If he really wanted to find him, it would be a troublesome matter. Glancing at the young girl covered in a thin gauze, Lu Yi raised his hand and took out a piece of his clothing and threw it to her. The young girl woke up from her dream and hurriedly put it on. Don't leave for now. It's not safe. You can leave after you've dealt with this matter. Lu Yi warned. Yes. The young girl was a bit distracted. She secretly thought that the sixth young master gave people a different feeling than before. In the past, the sixth young master didn't return to the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa. However, every time he came back, he would be cheerful and cheerful. This time, however, he seemed to be somewhat taciturn. However, she could understand. After all, no matter who it was that suddenly encountered such a drastic change, their personality would more or less change. But no matter what, the servants of the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa had a good impression of the young masters. This was because Yi Ying was an upright person. In his words and actions, his children were all upright and upright people. They would never do things like seek personal gain. Chapter 689. Inside the room the door was tightly shut. Lu Yi sat boldly on an armchair, the mountain saber casually placed beside his hand. His eyes were closed as he rested. The young girl who looked somewhat similar to Yi Liuli stood to the side. The room was filled with corpses, and the stench of blood filled the air. It was nauseating, but the young girl wasn't afraid at all. The sixth young master by her side gave her a great sense of security. Sneaking a few glances at Lu Yi, the young girl suddenly said, "Sixth young master, the head manor master was killed by the second manor master." Lu Yi opened his eyes and turned to look at her. He asked curiously, "How do you know?" An ordinary person who had never cultivated, even if he was a servant of the domineering Saber Mountain Villa, shouldn't know too many secrets. After all, even Lu Yi and Yi Liuli didn't know the whole story. The young girl pointed at the corpse on the ground. "He was talking nonsense and told me some things." Lu Yi understood. Yi Lang was abnormal. If he thought the young girl was Yi Liuli, it was possible that he would say some nonsense when he was excited. This allowed the young girl to know some of his secrets. "What did you hear?" Even though he wasn't very interested in the domineering Saber Mountain Villa's matters, it would be good if he could figure it out. In the end, he still had to give Yi Liuli an explanation. The young girl organized her words, then said, "The root of the matter should be him. Actually, when the head manor master was here, he often used his status to do some shady things. However, he was loyal to the manor master, so he didn't go too far. Until a few days ago, he seemed to have done something extremely evil. As for what it was, I don't know. Although the second manor master hid it, the head manor master still found out. The head manor master was furious and ordered him to be locked up. Actually, the head manor master already knew about his bad behavior, but he didn't punish him because he was the second manor master's only son. A few days ago, the head manor master went out for some business. The second manor master contacted the Divine Will sect and revealed the head manor master's location. That was why the head manor master met with misfortune. Then the Divine Will sect came to attack the manor master. That's why this happened." At this point, she suddenly remembered something. "Sixth young master, there seems to be people from the Divine Will sect in the manor." "I understand." Lu Yi nodded slightly. It wasn't much different from what he had heard from the pursuers, but it was more detailed. The destruction of the tyrannical Saber Villa was caused by the brothers' discord. To protect his only son's life, Yi Xiong had colluded with the Divine Will sect, which led to the subsequent events. Lu Yi didn't know why Yi Xiong would do such a thing, but if it was for Yi Lang, then it made sense. Yi Xiong cared a lot about his only son. He had a lot of wives and concubines, but in the end he only had one son. Compared to Yi Ying, who had a lot of children, he was afraid that his heart was not balanced. Moreover, his only son was a sickly invalid. It was uncertain whether he could continue his family line. Yi Ying's 6 sons and 1 daughter were all dragons and phoenixes among men. Human nature was indeed very complicated. Unfortunately, Yi Lang, whom he had spent so much effort to protect, was now lying on the ground like a dead dog. Even his corpse was ice cold. "Shoo!" Lu Yi suddenly raised a finger. The young girl quickly shut her mouth, her face becoming tense. Outside the courtyard, a figure slowly walked in. It was the second master of the tyrannical Saber Villa, Yi Xiong. His expression was dignified and stern, and there was a helpless look on his face. Colluding with the Divine Will sect was like asking a tiger for its skin, but he had no other choice. In the past, when that evil creature had made many mistakes, Ying didn't make a fuss about it for his sake. He only asked him to teach him well. But this time that evil creature had done too many things. He had raped and killed several good women. This made Ying furious. He had to make the first move to gain the upper hand. Otherwise, his only son's life would be in danger. But now, although he had saved that evil creature's life, he had fallen into a whirlpool, unable to extricate himself. From now on, the tyrannical Saber Villa would no longer exist. This place would only become a branch of the Divine Will sect. This made him depressed. Before, in the tyrannical Saber Villa, although Yi Ying had suppressed him, they were still brothers. In the future, he would have to listen to the Divine Will sect. His days would not be as free as before. It was all that evil creature's fault. Thinking of this, Yi Xiong was furious. He was about to teach that evil creature a lesson when he suddenly stopped. Yi Xiong sniffed lightly and his face changed. There was a faint smell of blood in the air. He jumped up and directly rushed into the courtyard. At a glance, he saw the bodies of the 2 guards lying outside the door. In the room there were 2 auras. One of them had a beating heart and seemed to be very nervous. He was an ordinary person, so there was no need to pay too much attention to him. The other person, how could it be? Yi Xiong looked panicked. He stepped forward and slammed the door open. What he saw made his pupils shrink. Inside the room on an armchair, a person he didn't expect was sitting upright, looking at him indifferently. At the feet of this person, a familiar figure was lying there. He didn't know how long he had been dead. Yi Lu. Yi Xiong gritted his teeth and roared. His spiritual power and blood boiled. The anger in his chest was like a volcano erupting. He didn't expect that Yi Lu, who should have died long ago, would appear in the tyrannical Saber Villa and kill his only son. Although that evil creature didn't do anything and made people worry, he was still his son. He was his hope to continue his family line. But now he was dead. Just like that, he died without a sound, just like a dead dog. How could he not be angry? You deserve to die. Yi Xiong roared and rushed towards Lu Yi without any hesitation or nonsense. If Yi Ying wanted to execute his son, then he would find a way to kill Yi Ying. If Yi Lu killed his son, then he would have to be buried with him. Yi Xiong's hair stood on end. He had never been so angry before. As he rushed forward, a long saber appeared in his hand. At the same time, Lu Yi also rushed out to kill. There was still an ordinary person beside him, so he naturally couldn't let Yi Xiong kill him. Otherwise, the aftermath of their fight would be enough to crush the girl. He had already arranged a protective array around the girl. As long as the battlefield wasn't inside the room, the girl's life wouldn't be in danger. The 2 figures collided in the blink of an eye. 2 long sabers of almost the same length and shape collided. Sparks flew and the sound of blades rang out. Lu Yi only felt a huge force coming towards him, causing his right hand to shake. Yi Xiong's attack revealed his cultivation realm at a glance. Cloud River 8th Order. In the Soaring Dragon realm there were many Cloud River realm cultivators, but the proportion of 9th Order cultivators was not high. Compared to the 9 states, this proportion was much lower. Perhaps it was related to the unique environment of this realm, but after a cultivator reached the Cloud River realm, their cultivation progress was extremely slow. Especially from the 8th Order to the 9th Order, there seemed to be a huge barrier. But in the 9 states there was no such thing. From the 8th Order to the 9th Order, as long as one accumulated enough spirit energy, they could safely break through. Therefore, among the great forces of the Soaring Dragon realm, there might be many 8th Order cultivators, but there would never be many 9th Order cultivators. This was also the reason why the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa, which was only a family-like force, could occupy a place in the Feng state. Yi Ying was a 9th Order master, while Yi Xiong, the 2nd Manor Lord, was only an 8th Order master. However, due to the difficulty of breaking through, the Cloud River realm cultivators of the Soaring Dragon realm were generally stronger than those of the 9 states. Because they had been in this realm for a longer time, they could polish their cultivation more. So, when they fought, Lu Yi felt some difference. If he had not entered the 100 Formation Tower, facing an 8th Order cultivator like Yi Xiong, he might have had a hard time. But the trip to the 100 Formation Tower had raised his cultivation by a minor realm. If this kind of improvement was placed on other cultivators, even if their strength had increased, it would still be within the normal range. But for someone like Jie Dunshan, whose foundation was incomparably strong, a minor realm increase was enough for his strength to increase tremendously. There was pressure, but it was not much. Yi Xiong's strength was within expectations. Compared to Lu Ye's indifference, Yi Xiong was truly shocked. Because his angry saber attack had actually been taken away. How was this possible? He clearly felt that the boy opposite him was 6th Order, 2 minor realms lower than him. He thought that even if his saber attack could not kill the other party, it could still severely injure the other party. But in the end, it did not have the slightest effect. This boy, what's going on? Yi Lu was not in the tyrannical saber manor all year round. Instead, he traveled all over the place. He only came back once or twice a year, so Yi Xiong did not know much about Yi Lu's details. It was only at this moment that he realized that this nephew of his was much more powerful than anyone had imagined. This kind of foundation had already far surpassed that of his brothers. His anger suddenly subsided. He suddenly remembered that before he came, Lu Ye's figure was sitting calmly. No wonder he was so fearless. It turned out that he had something to rely on. But so what? Yi Lang was dead. Someone had to be buried with him. Die! Yi Xiong roared and slashed again with his saber. In a small courtyard, 2 figures were fighting close to each other. Saber light flashed, and an invisible force raged. The walls of the courtyard and the house collapsed with a loud bang. Inside the collapsed house, a young girl's scream could be heard. Fortunately, there was a protective array protecting her, so she did not suffer any injuries. She was only buried in the ruins along with the light curtain protecting her. Clanging sounds rang out along with the huge commotion caused by the exchange of blows. The entire tyrannical Saber Mountain Manor was shocked, but with such a big commotion, no one dared to come over to investigate. Only a single figure flew over from a corner of Saber Lake, the aura of a Cloud River 9th Order cultivator radiating from his body. In the tyrannical Saber Manor, there was no other 9th Order Cloud River realm cultivator besides Yi Ying. Now that Yi Ying was dead, there was suddenly a new master. Obviously, he was an outsider. Divine Will Sect's Vice Sect Master Pang Wanhai came to the tyrannical Saber Manor for no other reason than the tyrannical saber technique. Chapter 690. Tyrannical Saber Villa and Divine Will Sect both belonged to Feng Province, so there was naturally some friction between them. In particular, Yi Ying and Divine Will Sect Master Xiong Taishan had a grudge when they were young, so Yi Xiong chose to collude with Divine Will Sect because he knew that as long as he leaked Yi Ying's whereabouts, Divine Will Sect would definitely take action. In fact, Divine Will Sect didn't fail to live up to his expectations. Xiong Taishan personally led 8 elders to set up an ambush and kill Yi Ying in one fell swoop. What happened next was simple. While the Divine Will Sect Master made his move, the Vice Sect Master, Pang Wanhai, led a group of people to attack the hegemonic Saber Manor. As a result, all of Yi Lu's brothers died in battle. Only Yi Lu and Yi Liuli managed to escape. Over the next few days, Pang Wanhai was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he stayed here to comprehend the Tyrant Saber technique. He had made some gains. In the end, he felt the sounds of an intense fight coming from somewhere in the manor. He was surprised and came to investigate. Arriving near the battlefield, Pang Wanhai looked up and saw 2 figures crisscrossing among the broken walls, their blades flashing. One of them was Yi Xiong, who had just separated from him, while the other was Yi Lu, who should have fled long ago. This surprised Pang Wanhai greatly. In his opinion, Yi Lu was only a 6th Order Cloud River realm cultivator, yet he was able to fight evenly with Yi Xiong. Pang Wanhai was well aware of Yi Xiong's strength, and knew he was stronger than the elders of Divine Will Sect. In the entire Divine Will Sect, only Pang Wanhai and Sect Master Xiong Taishan could suppress him. So how could this Yi Lu be so strong? While observing, he found that although Yi Lu's cultivation base was lower than Yi Xiong's, no matter if it was the speed or strength of his saber, they were not inferior. Moreover, because of his young age, his reaction speed was even faster than Yi Xiong's. This was the reason why he could defeat the strong as the weak. This boy can't be allowed to live. Search. Pang Wanhai immediately thought. If Yi Lu was already so strong at the 6th Order, if he was given enough time to break through to the 8th Order or 9th Order, he would definitely cause endless trouble. Although he didn't know why this kid had returned to the tyrannical Saber Villa, this was a good opportunity to kill him. Pang Wanhai's killing intent surged. On the other side, Yi Xiong, who was fighting with Lu Yi, was more and more surprised. He found that with his current strength, he couldn't do anything to his nephew. This made him both shocked and angry. He sensed Pang Wanhai's arrival and also sensed Pang Wanhai's surging killing intent. However, his only son had died at the hands of Lu Yi, and he wanted to kill him with his own hands to avenge his only son. If he allowed Pang Wanhai to interfere, even if he managed to kill him, he wouldn't feel at ease. Therefore, the moment he sensed Pang Wanhai's murderous intent, Yi Xiong's expression became resolute. In the end, he still had to use that blade technique. The long blade chopped down. This blade was the full force of Yi Xiong's attack. Accompanied by a crisp sound, both his and Lu Ye's figures slightly shook, and both of them floated backwards. At this moment, Lu Yi suddenly felt a sense of danger. This sense of danger didn't come from Pang Wanhai, who was watching from the side, but from Yi Xiong, who had been fighting with him. Lu Yi looked up and saw Yi Xiong not far in front of him squatting down. His hands held flat, one hand holding the saber motionless while the other hand suddenly swept across the blade, pouring his spirit chi into it. The long saber suddenly burst with a dazzling brilliance, its clear mirror-like blade reflecting Yi Xiong's cold gaze. Tyrannical saber technique. Lu Ye's heart jumped. Although he didn't know anything about the so-called tyrannical saber technique, seeing Yi Xiong's momentum suddenly change, he immediately understood what this guy wanted to do. Although the tyrannical saber technique was an ancient inheritance obtained by Yi Xiong, as the second manor lord of tyrannical saber villa, had naturally cultivated it. At this moment, since they couldn't defeat each other for a long time, they could only use the tyrannical saber technique to determine the winner. Just as Lu Ye's thoughts turned, Yi Xiong had already thrust his saber. Along with this strike, Yi Xiong's spirit chi instantly reached its peak, as if it was completely released with this strike. Kill! An angry roar sounded. On the side, Pang Wanhai, who was about to join forces with Yi Xiong to take down Lu Yi, couldn't help but stop, his eyes fixed on Yi Xiong's movements. In the past few days, he had been studying the tyrannical saber technique. Although he had some small gains, there were still some things he didn't understand. Ying was already dead, and the few kids of the Yi family were almost all dead. Now, the only ones who had mastered the tyrannical saber technique were probably these two people surnamed Yi in front of him. Being able to observe the tyrannical saber technique with his own eyes was naturally beneficial for him. A cold light bloomed, and a cold murderous aura enveloped the area. Then, a little bit of starlight bloomed, as if they were suddenly under a moonless night sky. The sky was twinkling with stars, and the world was quiet, with only the chirping of insects and the croaking of frogs. It was a scene of natural harmony. However, all of a sudden, the twinkling stars in the sky fell one after another, carrying the power to destroy the world. The first style of the tyrannical saber stars. Even Pang Wanhai, who was watching the battle from the side, couldn't help but be frightened by the cold light of the saber. His skin felt cold and his heart tightened. He was dazzled and didn't want to blink. It was rumored that the tyrannical saber had 3 styles. Except for the first style, stars, which was known to the world, no one knew what the other 2 styles were. It seemed that even Yi Ying had never used the other 2 styles in front of others. But even just this one style was enough for him to establish the tyrannical saber mountain villa in the Feng province. Yi Xiong's strength wasn't as good as Yi Ying's. From the perspective of a bystander, this saber style wasn't perfect, but even if it wasn't perfect, its power was still outrageous. This made Pang Wanhai even more interested in the tyrannical saber art. He secretly made up his mind that after Yi Xiong dealt with this brat, he would have him practice with him. He didn't dare to refuse. In his opinion, once this saber came out, Lu Yi would have no way to survive. Even if it was him facing such a saber, he could only temporarily dodge. If he took it head-on, even if he didn't die, he would be seriously injured. However, in the next moment, a scene that shocked him appeared. Lu Yi, facing this saber head-on, didn't retreat. Instead, he moved forward, crashing into the stars in the sky. At this moment, Lu Yi suddenly burst out with a power stronger than before. Since the girl had warned Lu Yi that there were people from the Divine Will sect in the mountain villa, how could Lu Yi not be on guard? So when he fought with Yi Xiong, he didn't use his full strength. Until now, he didn't hold back at all. The stars in the sky collapsed, and in a flash, the stars in the sky disappeared without a trace. What? Pang Wanhai's eyelids twitched. He clearly saw that in the face of Yi Xiong's tyrannical saber attack, That brat called 60 actually sent out more than 10 sabers in a flash, blocking almost all of the attacks. A figure flew out, blood splashing in the sky. It was Yi Xiong, who had been awe-inspiring just a moment ago. Lu Yi stood on the battlefield. His spiritual power and blood mixed together. Especially on his right arm, which was holding the saber, his blood was boiling. If he hadn't cultivated the blood transfer technique, which allowed him to burst out with strength and speed far beyond his normal strength, he wouldn't have been able to block this attack. Even so, Lu Yi lowered his head to look at his abdomen. Dark red blood dyed his clothes red. There was a hole in his lower abdomen, injuring his internal organs. Urging his spiritual power to seal the wound, Lu Yi let out a light breath. The reason why he came to the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa to take revenge was, first, to act according to 6th Young Master Ye's identity, and second, because he was interested in the tyrannical saber art. But before, he didn't think too much about it. He just thought that the saber technique of this world, even if profound, might not be as profound as what he had extorted from the Wild Saber sect. But after fighting with Yi Xiong, Lu Yi found that he had underestimated the tyrannical saber technique. This saber technique was probably something extraordinary. This made him even more interested in it. Looking at the entire 9 provinces with his current strength, there was no 8th order who could force him to use his full strength and still be injured. But Yi Xiong did it, not by his cultivation but by his saber. Such saber technique had exceeded the scope of normal saber technique, and even gave Lu Yi a strange feeling. Saber intent. Lu Yi had always heard of this kind of illusory thing, but he had never paid much attention to it because he always thought that saber technique was just a skill to fight with the enemy. It was a very simple thing, how could it be so illusory? But Yi Xiong's saber made him feel a trace of intent. This was very strange. At this time, if he went into retreat to meditate, he might be able to make some progress in his saber technique, but this was obviously not a good time. A scream pierced through the night sky as Yi Xiong was sent flying. It was true that he had cultivated the tyrannical saber technique, but this was the first time he had used it against an enemy because with his current attainments in the saber technique, it was impossible for him to display it. Forcibly using it would only put a huge burden on his body. At this moment on the surface, he only had injuries caused by Lu Ye's saber, but in reality, his flesh and blood had been torn apart. When he used that saber strike, his essence, qi, and soul had all been exhausted. At this moment he didn't have any strength left. He had thought that he could kill Lu Yi with that saber strike, but in the end, his cultivation wasn't enough. Not only did he fail to kill his enemy, but he was also injured by Lu Yi. In his mind, he couldn't help but recall Yi Ying's teachings, saying that his comprehension of this saber strike wasn't enough. Against weaker opponents it wouldn't be a big problem, but against stronger opponents, not only would this saber strike be ineffective, but it would also put him in an even more disadvantageous situation. But how could he use this kind of saber technique against weaker opponents? So even though he had cultivated the tyrannical saber technique, this was the first time he had used it against an enemy. The result was that he was full of resentment. "Brother Pang, please help." Yi Xiong, who was lying on the ground, looked at Pang Wanhai. Since he couldn't take revenge himself, he could only borrow the hands of others. Yi Lu was already injured, so if Pang Wanhai helped, there would be no problem. As it should be. Pang Wanhai was in a good mood after enjoying the battle, so he readily agreed to Yi Xiong's request. He raised his hand and grasped the void, and a long saber appeared in his hand. His fighting spirit surged as he looked at Lu Yi and said, "Brat, take 3 strikes from me and I'll spare your life." Chapter 691. Pang Wanhai was a little dissatisfied with Sect Master Xiong Taishan's previous arrangement. For a cultivator like him who had spent his entire life cultivating the saber technique, what he yearned for the most was to be able to have a great battle with a powerhouse of equal strength. It would be best if it was a powerhouse who had also cultivated the saber technique. Such a life and death battle might be able to bring his saber technique to the next level. In the entire Feng province, Ying was undoubtedly the best candidate. When they planned to ambush Ying, Pang Wanhai took the initiative to volunteer, but was rejected by Xiong Taishan. Of course he knew why Xiong Taishan rejected him. He was afraid that he would gain something from fighting Yi Ying. Moreover, in Xiong Taishan's opinion, a secret technique like the Tyrant Saber art must have been kept by Yi Ying. Pang Wanhai was interested in the Tyrant Saber art, and so was Xiong Taishan. Whoever could kill Yi Ying would have the opportunity to obtain the secret technique. Xiong Taishan was the sect master, and Pang Wanhai was only the vice sect master. Although Pang Wanhai was dissatisfied with the sect master's words, he could only obey. But the result was that the secret technique of the Tyrant Saber art was not carried by Yi Ying. Instead, it was left in the Tyrant Saber manor and eventually fell into Pang Wanhai's hands. This was also the reason why Pang Wanhai had been staying in the Tyrant Saber manor for the past few days and did not return to the Divine Will sect. If he returned, he would definitely lose the secret technique. He wanted to study it for a few more days. By chance he had obtained the secret technique, but it was a pity that he could not fight with a saber master like Yi Ying. But he did not expect that in addition to Yi Ying, the sixth son of the Tyrant Saber manor was also so strong. This made him feel happy. Seeing Yi Xiong defeated, Pang Wanhai raised his saber and pointed, his fighting spirit bursting. "Little brat, take 3 slashes and I'll spare your life." After seeing Lu Ye's strength with his own eyes, Pang Wanhai was not arrogant enough to think that he could kill him with 3 slashes. But Lu Yi had just fought a great battle and was injured. It was clear how much of his strength he could use, which gave him full confidence. Moreover, even if he did not die after taking 3 slashes, so what? It would be too naive of him to believe what he said. If a casual sentence could make his opponent believe it, then Yi Lu was not a threat at all. He had not used his killing move but his verbal attack. As soon as he finished speaking, Pang Wanhai leapt forward, his spirit chi surging, his 9th order Cloud River realm cultivation clearly displayed. Then he saw Lu Yi suddenly float backwards. A small flag had appeared in his hand at some point, and he gently waved it. This is Pang Wanhai's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately sensed that something was wrong. By the time he wanted to retreat, it was already too late. A layer of light that was visible to the naked eye suddenly appeared out of thin air, like a transparent bowl that covered him completely. Formation. Pang Wanhai's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Yi Lu could actually set up a formation? Furthermore, it was obvious that he had come prepared. Oh no, when Lu Yi was waiting here, he wasn't just doing nothing. Although he was quite strong now, he wouldn't underestimate the strength of his enemies. While waiting, he had already set up many formations in the small courtyard. Yi Xiong and Pang Wanhai, these 2 weapon cultivators, knew nothing about arrays, so they didn't notice anything strange around them. When fighting Yi Xiong, Lu Yi didn't activate the power of the array because Yi Xiong didn't pose much of a threat to him. This moment it was perfect to deal with Pang Wanhai. Although he also wanted to fight a 9th order cultivator to test his current strength, this was obviously not a good time. Using the array to deal with him was the best choice. Pang Wanhai's reaction was extremely fast. When he realized that something was wrong, he wanted to escape, but the array had already been set up. Even if he was a 9th order cultivator, there was no way he could directly rush out of the range of the array. He slammed into the transparent light curtain, causing it to ripple. The array flag in Lu Ye's hand suddenly waved down. In the next moment, many killing arrays erupted inside the light curtain. For a moment, lightning bolts swam like snakes, golden arcs of lightning raged, and pillars of fire erupted like dragons. The spirit energy in the area was chaotic, and the momentum was terrifying. Finally, with a violent explosion, a huge flame soared into the sky. Before the trip to the 100 array tower, Lu Yi couldn't arrange such a compound spirit array. At the very least, there was no way to embed so many spirit arrays in such a small area. However, the trip to the 100 array tower had greatly increased his attainments in the Tao of arrays, so it wasn't difficult for him to do this. The powerful impact caused the light curtain of the array to collapse. Amidst the soaring flames, a figure suddenly dashed out and fled without looking back. It was Pang Wanhai. In such a small space, he had withstood the power of so many killing arrays and had not died yet. However, compared to his majestic appearance, he could be said to be in an extremely sorry state at this moment. His clothes were ragged, his face was pitch black, and his body was covered in countless injuries. Blood was flowing out, and even his ninth-order Cloud River Realm aura was extremely weak. With such injuries, although he wasn't dead, he was still seriously injured. There was only one thought surging in his mind. This smelly brat doesn't care about martial ethics. Shouldn't a dignified weapon cultivator fight in close combat with the enemy? Why is he playing with spirit arrays? Is this something a weapon cultivator should play with? Weapon cultivators were known for their stubbornness. Such an existence had nothing to do with spirit arrays. He had never heard of the Yi family's sixth brother being proficient in the Tao of arrays. Run! Peng Wanhai hurriedly fled this place. In his current state, it was not suitable for him to fight. Although he was seriously injured, Peng Wanhai's heart was filled with only resentment, not fear. With his speed, a sixth-order cultivator would never be able to catch up to him. As long as he survived this disaster, he would repay this humiliation 1,000 times over. Just as he was thinking this, though, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine as he perceived a sharp aura approaching him at an extremely fast speed. Peng Wanhai turned his head and his pupils shrank. How is this possible? How can this sixth master Yi be so fast? Also, what's with that pair of fiery red wings? Before Peng Wanhai could figure out what was going on, a bright saber light spread out in his field of vision. Peng Wanhai grit his teeth and turned around to raise his saber. Hung! In a violent collision, Lu Ye's pursuing figure paused slightly while Peng Wanhai's body fell like a meteor from the sky. Lu Ye's wings flapped behind him and followed him like a shadow. I'm determined to kill him. After a short while, Lu Yi walked out of the ruins, gently swinging the mountain saber in his hand before sheathing it. Behind him, Peng Wanhai was half kneeling on the ground, his eyes still filled with shock and disbelief. The aura on his body had completely dissipated. He had never imagined that he would die here. Not long ago, he had been excitedly comprehending the tyrant saber technique. In a small courtyard, inside a protective array, a young girl with a figure somewhat similar to Yi Luli stood. Although her face was pale, her eyes were bright. Thanks to the protective array, the aftermath of the previous battle had not hurt her. Even if the house she was in collapsed, it was blocked by the protective array's light curtain. She had never cultivated before, so she did not know how dangerous the previous battle had been. But she had seen Lu Yi beat Yi Xiong like a dead dog and saw the majestic Peng Wanhai flee, his fate unknown. It turns out that the sixth young master is so powerful. The thick dark clouds in the sky dispersed and the bright moonlight poured down, just like the young girl's mood at the moment. No one would bully her again. The battle here had erupted suddenly and ended quickly. The battle between Lu Yi and Yi Xiong had only lasted for 20 breaths of time, and Peng Wanhai had been killed in about the same time. Therefore, only now did the other cultivators in the villa hear the commotion and come over. They looked up and saw Peng Wanhai's kneeling corpse and Yi Xiong, who was lying on the ground like a dead dog, his essence, qi and spirit drained, as if he had suddenly aged many years. They also saw a figure that should not have appeared here. Sixth young master. Someone murmured. These cultivators who had rushed over could be considered the disciples of the Tyrant Saber Villa. Although the Tyrant Saber Villa was a family-like force, the Yi family alone could not support such a huge family business, so Yi Ying and Yi Xiong had taken in many disciples over the years. When the Tyrant Saber Villa had been breached, many people had died in battle, some had fled, and many had survived. Those who remained in the Tyrant Saber Villa were basically those who obeyed Yi Xiong. However, although these people had cultivation, only a few of them were in the Cloud River realm, and their cultivation was not high. At this moment, these disciples who had rushed over looked at Lu Yi and Yi Xiong lying on the ground with complicated expressions. When the Tyrant Saber Villa had been breached, many of them did not know what had happened. Only when the dust had settled did they realize something. In any case, colluding with outsiders was not something to be proud of. In these few days, many of the surviving disciples had been suffering in their hearts, and only felt that the road ahead was bleak. The fact that something like this had happened tonight made them feel even more confused. Kill him. A weak voice sounded. It was Yi Xiong lying on the ground. Kill him quickly. Yi Xiong had used all his strength to wield the tyrant saber. At this moment he was truly a lamp without oil. Pang Wanhai, who he had relied on, was also dead. If he wanted to live, he could only rely on these disciples. Although these disciples were not outstanding, if they swarmed together they might have a chance. No one moved. Not to mention that Pang Wanhai's death had shocked them greatly. Lu Ye's identity as the sixth young master made them unable to do anything. After a while a disciple clasped his fists and bowed to Lu Yi. "Sixth young master, take care." Saying so he turned around and left. Attacking Lu Yi was absolutely impossible, but it was not good for him to stay. After thinking about it he decided to leave. After the Tyrant Saber Villa had experienced such an incident, it was hard to say whether the Tyrant Saber Villa would still exist in the Feng province in the future. Some people took the lead while others followed. The hesitant disciples saw that Lu Yi did not have the slightest intention to persuade them to stay. They knew that even if they stayed they would not be welcomed in the future, so they all left. In a moment, the cultivators who had come here had all left. Only Yi Xiong's unwilling and powerless roar echoed in the night sky. To be continued. Chapter 692. Lu Yi stepped forward, looking down at Yi Xiong from above. Dan Mo's eyes finally made Yi Xiong panic. "Yi Lu, I'm your second uncle. You can't kill me. You're still young. You don't want to live with the crime of killing your own family, do you?" Yi Xiong struggled to speak. Even at this time he still had the instinct to live. The only response he got was a flash of blade light. "Yi Lu's second uncle was related to me, Louis." Yi Xiong died. His eyes widened, as if he didn't expect his nephew to act so decisively. In the middle of the night, the tyrannical Saber Manor was in chaos. The news of Pang Wanhai and Yi Xiong's death spread quickly. The remaining disciples left one after another. Yi Xiong's wives and concubines also scattered, afraid that Lu Yi would come and kill them. Lu Yi was not in the mood. Although he had to act according to Yi Lu's identity, killing Yi Xiong and Yi Lang was enough. As for Yi Xiong's wives and concubines, most of them were ordinary people who had never cultivated. A few of them were cultivators, but their cultivation was not very high. Lu Yi came in front of the girl and removed the protective array. He said, "You should go too. Live a good life. If there's anything you like in the manor, just take it." After today, the tyrannical Saber Manor would no longer exist in Feng province. Lu Yi didn't care much about the properties in the manor. Those things were useful to ordinary people but not to cultivators. The girl knelt in front of Lu Yi and kowtowed 3 times, then hurriedly left. Lu Yi raised his hand and touched the battlefield imprint, sending a message to Yi. The sky was getting brighter. Lu Yi was the only one left in the manor. In the center of the Saber Lake, there was a small island with a few simple wooden houses. In front of the houses was a field of green bamboo. Compared to the solemn atmosphere of the tyrannical Saber Manor, it seemed out of place. Lu Yi moved a chair and sat in front of a wooden house, playing with a black stone in his hand. His eyes flashed with contemplation. Even with his vision he couldn't tell what this black stone was made of. It was the secret inheritance of the tyrannical saber art. It was an opportunity that Yi Ying had obtained in his early years. Lu Yi didn't expect to get it so easily. The main reason why he came to the tyrannical saber villa to take revenge was because of the tyrannical saber art. However, he didn't have much hope because Yi Xiong had colluded with the Divine Will sect. If there was anything good, it would have been taken away by the Divine Will sect, especially the secret inheritance of the tyrannical saber art. It was impossible to leave it in the tyrannical saber villa. He had originally thought that he would only have a chance to retrieve the secret manual after he had dealt with the Divine Will sect. Unexpectedly, he actually found this item in Pang Wanhai's storage pouch. This was truly an unexpected surprise. How could he have known that this secret manual was also an unexpected surprise for Pang Wanhai? The reason he had stayed at the domineering Saber Manor instead of returning to the Divine Will sect was because he wanted to comprehend the domineering saber art for a few more days. But in the end he had lost his life. It could only be said that there was bound to be something in life, and there was no need to force it. This secret manual was not the only thing he had gained. Ying had established the tyrannical saber villa many years ago, and had collected many things about the saber art. Among them, there was no lack of the insights of masters. They were all placed in the library of the tyrannical saber villa. Now they were all in Lu Ye's storage pouch. He had casually checked before and found that his gains were much more abundant than he had imagined. This world was limited by the heavens and earth. The upper limit of a cultivator's cultivation was the Cloud River realm. However, it was also because of this reason that cultivators would shift the focus of their cultivation to polishing their skills when they could no longer improve their cultivation. This led to a phenomenon. The Cloud River realm cultivators of this world were generally stronger than the cultivators of the 9 continents in terms of fighting skills. This was especially true for the Cloud River realm 9th order cultivators. No one knew what kind of foundation they had unless it was a life or death battle. Peng Wanhai's death was actually a little sullen. He had judged Lu Ye's ability based on his inherent knowledge, but in the end, he had been defeated by the spirit array that Lu Yi had set up in advance. Who would have thought that a weapon cultivator who used the saber would also be proficient in spirit arrays? If it had really been a life or death battle, it would have been a bitter one. The things in the library were not only the saber art insights of Cloud River realm cultivators. In the early years of the Soaring Dragon realm, there were Spirit Sea realm cultivators. Although hundreds of years had passed, many things were still passed down. The secret manual of the tyrannical saber art, the gains in the library. Just these things alone made this trip worthwhile for Lu Yi. And these things were all things that he longed for in the 9 continents but could not obtain. In the sky, a stream of light pierced through the air and soon landed in front of him, revealing 2 figures with similar figures. It was Yi and Yi Liuli. Last night, after dealing with Yi Xiong, Lu Yi sent a message to Yi. However, Yi Liuli was still unconscious at that time, so Yi did not disturb her. It was not until Yi Liuli woke up that Yi brought her over. After a night of rest, Yi Liuli's spirit had recovered a lot. 6th brother. Yi Liuli called out softly and looked around. She had built the wooden house on the island with her own hands. It was also her favorite place. In the entire tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa, except for her, no one could come here. It was a familiar place, a familiar scenery, but many familiar figures were no longer there. The little girl was secretly sad. Yi Xiong is dead. There was also a 9th order cultivator from the Divine Will sect. I don't know his name, but I killed them all, Lu Yi said. Yi Liuli did not know how her 6th brother did such a thing, but the death of her enemies was undoubtedly something to be happy about. The little girl's nose twitched, her eyes reddened, and tears rolled down her cheeks. The culprit this time was Yi Xiong. He was the one who leaked Yi, our father's whereabouts, and attracted the Divine Will sect to surround and kill him. Lu Ye's current identity was 6th brother Yi. But when he called someone else father, Lu Yi still could not breathe properly. Rest well first. I'll think of a way to get revenge later. Yi Liuli shook her head, tears streaming down her face. It's enough, 6th brother. All her family members were dead, and only 6th brother was left. The main culprit had been executed, and her revenge had been avenged. She didn't want to see 6th brother go up against the Divine Will sect again. If something were to happen to 6th brother, then she would really be all alone. Lu Yi naturally did not care. He had already gotten what he wanted, and since Yi Liuli said so, he just went along with it, nodding lightly. Rest first. You haven't rested well these past few days. Although he said so, Lu Yi knew that even if he did not go to the Divine Will sect, they would still come looking for him. After all, Peng Wanhai had died here. The death of a 9th order cultivator was a huge blow to the Divine Will sect. No matter what, the Divine Will sect would respond. Unless he took Yi Liuli away from Feng province and left the scope of the Divine Will sect's influence. But right now, he was eager to comprehend his gains. So how could he be willing to run around and tire himself? The Divine Will sect was strong. If he took the initiative to attack them, he might not have a chance of winning, but if they dared to come, he would not have a good ending. Array cultivators were best at defending against enemies. As long as they were given enough time and space, they could form an army by themselves. Yi Liuli obeyed his instructions and went to rest in a wooden house. Lu Yi asked Yi to stay behind and look after her, while he began to arrange a large spirit array around the island. In the Cloud River battlefield, he was targeted by the myriad demon Ridgeside, but he was still safe and sound. No matter how strong the Divine Will sect was, it was not stronger than a large camp. While he was busy here, the Divine Will sect received some news. Many people left the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa that day, so all kinds of news naturally spread. The changes in the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa had already attracted the attention of the Feng Province's cultivation world. After all, the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa was a big force. What happened after that was even more shocking. 6th young Master Yi went back to the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa alone, killed Yi Xiong and Pang Wanhai, and avenged the blood feud with his own strength. If not for the fact that more than one person spread the news, no one would have believed it. Yi Xiong was only an 8th order cultivator, but who was Pang Wanhai? He was the Divine Will sect's vice sect master, a 9th order cultivator, while Yi Lu was only a 6th order cultivator. How could he kill those two? No one knew the specific details of the battle, but the result was there, so people had no choice but to believe it. Unlike the cultivators who took it as idle gossip, the Divine Will sect's reaction was much more intense. The vice sect master died in the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa. Even if it was rumored that Yi Lu had the ability to kill a 9th order cultivator, the Divine Will sect would not let it go so easily. Over the past few days, many Divine Will sect cultivators were ordered to sneak into the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa to find out what happened. However, the entire tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa was like a bottomless abyss, and all the cultivators who entered were missing. Even an 8th order elder of the Divine Will sect was among them. This time the Divine Will sect was a little shocked. They secretly speculated that there might be some mysterious master behind Yi Lu. Otherwise, how could a 6th order cultivator do such a thing? Perhaps the one who killed Yi Xiong and Peng Wanhai was also the mysterious master hiding behind Yi Lu? After losing some people, the Divine Will sect did not dare to act rashly. They only left some people to monitor the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa from afar. The unknown was the most terrifying enemy. The Divine Will sect dared to attack Yiying and the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa, because the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa's full strength was in the open. But now the entire tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa seemed to be wrapped in a layer of fog. Who would dare to act rashly before finding out the truth? This saved Lu Yi a lot of trouble. The reason why the Divine Will sect cultivators who sneaked in were nowhere to be found was because they had fallen into the spirit array. No one in the entire Soaring Dragon realm would be able to see through the formation he had set up. Those who fell into the formation would not have a good ending, not to mention the disciples of the Divine Will sect. Even the sect master of the Divine Will sect would not be able to see through it. In the past few days, he was not in a hurry to cultivate the tyrannical saber art, nor did he comprehend the many saber techniques he had obtained from the library. He had been meditating calmly to relieve the pressure on his soul. To be continued. Chapter 693. The gift he had received from the 100 Formation Pagoda was simply too great. After leaving the pagoda, his spirit had been constantly under immense pressure. He had originally planned to find a secluded place after leaving the 100 Formation Pagoda, or go into seclusion at the Tianji Business Alliance. He had not expected to suddenly come to the Soaring Dragon realm. After that, he was hunted down, and then came to the tyrannical Saber Mountain Manor to seek revenge. Only now did he barely manage to settle down. The gift from the 100 Formation Pagoda was not so easy to digest. The gift he had received from the 100 Formation Pagoda in the Sky Expanse sect had taken 1 or 2 years to digest. The gift he had received from the 100 Formation Pagoda in the Cloudy River battlefield was more than 10 times greater than the previous one. However, it would not take 10 times longer. Firstly, Lu Ye's spirit was now much stronger than before. Secondly, his cultivation in the Tao of Formations could not be mentioned in the same breath as before. However, it was still not something that could be completed in a short period of time. Lu Yi did not need to digest the entire gift. He only needed to digest a part of it so that his spirit would not be so pressured. He rarely meditated like this. Occasionally he would try it out. It was a different experience. 5 days later, in the wooden house he was staying in, Lu Yi slowly opened his eyes. There was a faint glimmer in his eyes. After 5 days of comprehension and sorting out, the pressure on his spirit no longer existed. However, the more he comprehended, the more he could feel the vastness of the gift. After his trip to the Sky Expanse sect, Lu Yi had been curious about one thing. Who had created the 100 Formation Pagoda? Why did it have such a miraculous effect? How was it divided into 3 parts? Such a treasure would definitely exceed the knowledge of the cultivation world of the 9 prefectures. If it was in its complete state, what would it be like? It was a pity that there were only 2 parts of the 100 Formation Pagoda in the cultivation world of the 9 prefectures. The location of the 3rd part was unknown. There were many unrecognized secrets in the cultivation world of the 9 prefectures. Not to mention Lu Yi, who was only at the Cloud River tier. Could even those at the Divine Sea tier know everything? Perhaps even they could not see the truth of the 100 Formation Pagoda. The pressure on his soul had been relieved for the time being, but it would take some time for him to completely digest the enormous gift. This matter could not be rushed, and he would slowly digest it when he had the time in the future. Lu Yi had a faint feeling that if he could digest all the benefits he had obtained this time, then his attainments in Array Dao might not be the best in the world, but at least in the entire 9 regions, he would be at the top. This wasn't him being arrogant, but he was certain of one thing. There had never been an array cultivator in the 9 continents who had obtained such great benefits from the 100 Formation Pagoda like him. But then again, although the 100 Formation Pagoda's gift could greatly increase Lu Ye's attainments in Array Dao in a short period of time, it was still a kind of enlightenment that did not belong to him. If there was a day when he could obtain the pagoda and transcend the pagoda, then he would be able to walk his own path. Of course, that was a matter for a long time to come. Lu Yi only had a vague idea of what to do in the near future. For now, he wasn't qualified to do so. Only after the pressure on his soul had been relieved did Lu Yi take out the unknown black stone from his storage space. The black stone was the size of an egg and completely black. At first glance it looked inconspicuous, but upon closer inspection, one would realize that the black stone was like a black hole that could even swallow one's sight. The secret inheritance of the tyrannical saber art. It was impossible to verify where Yi Ying had obtained the black stone. There were only rumors that he had obtained it from an ancient ruin. It was also because of this black stone that Yi Ying had created the tyrannical saber art and the tyrannical saber mountain villa. It could be said that this small black stone was the root of the tyrannical saber mountain villa. The tyrannical saber mountain villa had indeed been destroyed, and there would be no tyrannical saber mountain villa in the future. However, as long as this black stone existed, the tyrannical saber art would not be lost. Lu Yi stared at the black stone. Even with his powerful soul, he was slightly shaken. Faintly, he felt as if his entire body was about to be sucked into the darkness. He urged his spiritual energy and poured it into the black stone. In an instant, the small black stone seemed to have become a bottomless pit, constantly swallowing Lu Ye's spiritual energy. The darkness on the surface of the black stone became deeper and deeper, as if it was about to materialize and flow out of the stone. Until a certain moment, a black fog visible to the naked eye surged out. The black fog seemed to have a mind of its own as it rolled back and wrapped around Lu Yi. Lu Yi did not panic. When he had killed Pang Wanhai and waited here for Yi and Yi Liuli, he had urged this black stone, so he knew that this was a normal phenomenon. Wrapped in the black fog, Lu Yi instantly lost all perception of his surroundings, as if he had entered another world. This world was gray and hazy. As far as the eye could see, 3 indistinct figures could be seen in front of him. Although the faces of the figures could not be seen clearly, judging from the outlines, these 3 figures should be the same person. However, they corresponded to the 3 states of a person's life. The figure on the left was full of vitality and high spirits. The figure in the middle was mature and steady like a mountain. The figure on the right had a long beard that reached his chest. Although his figure was slightly stooped, his aura was as deep as the sea and as vast as the starry sky. Youth, middle-aged, old. Lu Yi vaguely guessed that this should be the mark left by the creator of the tyrant saber art in the black stone to pass on his saber art. Each figure corresponded to a move of the tyrant saber. 3 figures meant that the tyrant saber had 3 moves. This was undoubtedly an extremely brilliant method of inheritance. Compared to using jade slips or books to record, it was much more intuitive. However, this method was not something that just anyone could do. At the very least, Lu Yi had never heard of any divine sea realm cultivator in the 9 provinces who could do this. Perhaps he was ignorant, or perhaps this was not a divine sea realm cultivator's method. The last time Lu Yi came here, he had stimulated the figure of the youth on the far left. However, in just 3 breaths he had retreated from here. This time he suddenly had the idea to try the other 2 figures. As for how to stimulate them, it was not a troublesome matter. After all, this was only an inheritance. The spiritual energy he poured into the black stone was the key to opening this inheritance. However, just as Lu Yi was about to do so, a cold feeling suddenly swept through his body. It was as if an invisible beast had stretched out its tongue and licked his divine soul. Lu Yi suddenly froze, and a trace of understanding appeared in the depths of his heart. With his current strength, he could not rashly stimulate the figures of the middle-aged and the old man. Otherwise, he would really die here. A strong divine soul not only gave birth to a strong perception, but also a premonition of danger. Lu Yi suddenly understood. No wonder even Yiying had never used the 2nd and 3rd moves of the tyrant saber. The world only knew that he did not need to use these 2 moves against enemies, but in fact, he had never cultivated them. Because Lu Yi was sure that with Yiying's foundation, it was not enough to stimulate the figures of the middle-aged and the old man, unless he wanted to die. This made Lu Yi laugh involuntarily. However, this also proved the greatness of the tyrant saber from another perspective. With just 1 move of the tyrant saber, Yiying had such an achievement. If he could really learn the 2nd and 3rd moves, he would be invincible in the entire soaring dragon realm. Since he could not rashly stimulate the figures of the middle-aged and the old man, Lu Yi once again turned his gaze to the figure of the youth on the left. As a cultivator, it was necessary to maintain enough curiosity, but sometimes one also needed to act according to one's ability. Otherwise, one would be courting death. With a thought, the youth's figure also moved. A long saber had appeared in his hand at some unknown time. The long saber was the same as his figure, pitch black, and did not seem to be a real thing. The youth's figure slightly squatted down, both hands flat, the long saber horizontally in front of his eyes, and the other hand gently brushed the blade. This posture was the same as Yi Xiong's when he used the tyrant saber technique. Although it looked similar, the youth's movement made Lu Yi feel as if a sleeping dragon had suddenly awoken. It was as if there was a huge dragon head peeking out from its dragon's lair, overlooking all living things. Under the boundless pressure, not only could Lu Ye's body not move, even his thoughts were almost stagnant. The power of Yi Xiong's attack that day, if it had even a fraction of this youth's figure, Lu Yi would have died 100 times over. It seemed like an instant but also like a million years. The youth's saber. It was an ordinary straight stab slow. Such a saber, even an ordinary person who had never cultivated could see it clearly. However, as the long saber moved forward, an unbelievable scene appeared. In the darkness, it was as if the dark clouds had dispersed, revealing countless twinkling stars in the sky. Each of those stars was the flickering light of the saber. The curtain of stars fell, and the overwhelming starlight followed the long saber, surging towards Lu Yi and wrapping him up. The first move of the tyrant saber, stars. When Yi Xiong had used this move, Lu Yi had also had this illusion, but he had quickly gotten rid of it. But at this moment, after the young man had used this move, he couldn't get rid of it no matter how hard he tried. It was as if countless stars were really falling from the sky, wrapping the whole curtain of the sky and smashing towards him. Under such heavenly power, who could block it? Perhaps an entire domain would be destroyed. Lu Ye's spirit soul suffered a great deal of pain in an instant, causing him to groan uncontrollably. It felt as if countless sharp knives were cutting his spirit soul. But he was unwilling to even blink, staring at the youth's movements. He opened his mind, allowing his soul to feel the thousands of kinds of pain, carefully perceiving the mysteries of this saber move. Every saber light that cut into Lu Ye's body gave him a new level of enlightenment. Every moment was stretched to the limit, and it seemed like an eternity, but in reality it was only 5 breaths. The starlight in the sky shattered, and the surrounding darkness was swept away. The scene of the wooden house appeared in Lu Ye's vision again. Lu Ye gasped for breath as if he was drowning, his clothes soaked with sweat. Although he knew that what he experienced in that environment was not real, and was just a vision caused by the inheritance, but it was too real, so real that it was as if he had really been buried under the stars. To be continued. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.